All right, settle in, you brave, foolish souls. Pull up a blanket, preferably one that isn't covered in inexplicable stains and hasn't been gnawed on by something you really don't want to think about. Tonight, we're embarking on a journey. Not a pleasant one, mind you. No, tonight we're dragging your pampered 21st century posterior back to a time when antibiotics were a distant, baffling dream, and a good night out usually ended in either a brawl, a robbery, or a truly impressive bout of dysentery. So, you fancy yourself a time traveler, do you? You, with your ergonomic chair, your triple filtered water, and your immune system that probably couldn't survive a stiff breeze without collapsing into an anaphylactic fit, excellent! Because tonight, we're going to prove with exhaustive, horrifying detail why you wouldn't last a single night in a medieval tavern. And trust me, it's not because you're a lightweight. It's because the medieval world would chew you up, spit you out, and then probably reuse your chewed-up remains for stew. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a public service announcement, a warning, a darkly comedic exposé designed to make you deeply appreciate your heated toilet seat and the fact that most public establishments don't actively try to poison you. You think you're ready for this? You are not. But that's the fun part, isn't it? Let's dive into the glorious, stinking abyss. The medieval tavern, a bastion of warmth, cheer, and hearty fellowship, right? You've seen it in the movies. The grand hall, a roaring fire crackling merrily in the hearth, casting a golden glow over rosy-cheeked patrons, their faces alight with good cheer, the air thick with the scent of roasting game and rich, frothy ale. A brawny, yet undeniably charming, barkeep wipes down the polished oak bar with a clean cloth, perhaps humming a jaunty tune. In the corner, a heroic bard strums a lute, regaling the crowd with tales of dragons and valiant knights, his voice echoing perfectly without any pesky acoustic issues. Friendly faces abound, clinking mugs in a symphony of communal joy, sharing stories, laughter, and an almost entirely fictional sense of camaraderie. It's the kind of place that appears on your carefully curated Pinterest board of medieval aesthetics. All rustic charm, no unpleasant realities. It's the backdrop for every fantasy novel where the protagonist gets vital information, or starts a bar fight, or falls in love, all without ever once questioning the basic hygiene of the establishment. You can practically feel the warmth of the roaring fire, hear the deep, booming laughter, smell the wholesome, yeasty aroma of freshly brewed ale. It's an idyllic, almost sacred space where the burdens of the medieval world momentarily dissipate, replaced by merriment and the simple pleasure of a shared drink. A cozy, inviting sanctuary from the harsh, cold reality outside, bathed in a perpetually flattering, soft candlelight that somehow never seems to cause anyone eye strain. It's the kind of place where heroes are forged, legends are told, and everyone seems to have impeccable dental hygiene despite living in an era without toothbrushes. It's the historical equivalent of a filter on Instagram. It makes everything look infinitely better than it actually is, conveniently omitting all the unsightly, unappetizing truths. You look at these images, these cinematic masterpieces of an imagined past, and you think, yes, I could totally hang out there. I could thrive there. Maybe even find a quest. You fool. You utterly, utterly charming fool. Now, let's snatch that frothy mug of fantasy right out of your soft, modern hands, because that idyllic image, That's a cruel, smelly, disease-ridden lie, meticulously crafted by people who've never actually had the dubious pleasure of smelling a medieval peasant after a full day of field work, let alone an entire room full of them. Tonight, we're not just going to expose the horrifying truth, we're going to force you to virtually marinate in it. Imagine a combination of a dimly lit, unventilated barn, a heavily patronized public toilet that hasn't seen a mop in a decade, and the collective body odor of 1,000 unwashed gym socks, all simmered together in a broth of stale beer and desperation. That's your medieval tavern. Forget the roaring fire. Think choking smoke that makes your eyes water and your lungs regret every breath. Forget the hearty ale. Think questionable liquid that might or might not have passed through a rat at some point. And as for the friendly faces, they're usually either deeply suspicious, openly hostile, or so utterly plastered that their facial expressions are stuck somewhere between a vacant stare and a mild stroke. The bard? Probably just a vagrant with a lute missing 3 strings, screeching off-key laments about lost love and impending plague. The only fellowship you'll find is the shared misery of trying not to contract a lethal pathogen from the communal drinking vessel. This isn't a place for warm, fuzzy feelings. It's a petri dish with pretensions. It's a sensory assault, a bacterial wonderland, a social experiment in how much human discomfort one can endure before simply curling up and accepting the cold embrace of the Black Death. It's an environment that actively works against every single one of your 21st century sensibilities, from your desire for personal space to your fervent belief in germ theory. It's a place where every surface is sticky, every corner holds a secret, and every breath is an exercise in biohazard roulette. The romantic ideal you cling to is a mirage, a cruel joke whispered by the winds of history to lure unsuspecting modern folk into a world of genuine, unadulterated suffering. So, tonight, dear listener, we're not just dispelling myths. We're actively trying to kill you with historical accuracy, one agonizing, meticulously researched detail at a time. This isn't a gentle debunking, it's an immersive historical immersion therapy, where the therapy involves forcing you to confront every vile, nauseating truth about a single night in a medieval establishment. We're going to peel back the layers of romanticized BS and reveal the true, grimy, horrifying core. We're going to make you taste the grit, smell the putrescence, and feel the cold, clammy touch of historical reality. By the end of this journal, you'll either be profoundly grateful for indoor plumbing and hand sanitizer, or you'll have developed a very specific, historically accurate phobia of shared wooden mugs. This isn't just about what you wouldn't last. It's about making you understand why you wouldn't last in vivid, gut-wrenching detail. Consider this your exposure therapy, but instead of overcoming a fear, we're trying to cultivate a healthy, crippling terror of the past. We aim to traumatize you, but in an educational, slightly sarcastic way. We will dissect the very fabric of this so-called charming environment, exposing its structural flaws, its sanitary shortcomings, and its profound indifference to your delicate modern constitution. Prepare to have your illusions shattered, your stomach turned, and your general faith in humanity significantly eroded. It's going to be a wild, disgusting ride, and you're strapped in. No refunds. This is a deep dive, folks, into the truly awful, yet undeniably accurate aspects of a single night out in the medieval age. We're talking everything from the journey to the tavern to the moment you inevitably collapse in a heap of filth and despair. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable and highly lethal historical journey. Every creak of the floorboard, every waft of questionable air, every suspicious glance from a local, we're going to amplify it all. You'll practically feel the fleas jumping on you. You'll taste the grit in your ale. You'll hear the muffled cries of a bar brawl in the next room. This isn't just a narration, it's an attempt at sensory teleportation, minus the convenience of a return ticket. You're going to experience the entire sordid affair, from the perilous approach to the even more perilous attempt at sleep, and the almost guaranteed regret of the morning. It's a comprehensive tour of discomfort, a masterclass in why nostalgia is often a liar. So brace yourself. This isn't for the faint of heart or stomach. You're entering a realm where rustic charm is just a polite way of saying sanitation-free zone, and authentic experience means potential agonizing death. And for those of you with particularly robust constitutions, or perhaps a morbid curiosity bordering on self-destructive tendencies, this entire odyssey of squalor also serves as perfect background noise. Yes, my friends, this is the ideal sleep aid setup for those who find the suffering of others utterly soothing. If the gentle sounds of historical disease transmission, drunken brawls, and rampant unsanitary conditions don't lull you into a peaceful slumber, I don't know what will. Forget whale sounds. Tonight, you get the authentic symphony of medieval suffering. It's the ASMR of agony, the white noise of woe, the lullaby of pestilence. Imagine drifting off to the dulcet tones of a plague rat scurrying across a floor slick with vomit, punctuated by the occasional guttural scream from a patron who just lost an ear in a dice game. Doesn't that sound absolutely relaxing? It's designed to gently remind you that your bed, your pillows, your clean air, and the fact that no one is currently trying to stab you for your spare change are blessings beyond measure. So, if you manage to drift off, congratulations. You've either developed an iron constitution or you're completely dead, which, let's be honest, is a very medieval outcome. Enjoy the nightmares. You've earned them. All right, adventurer. Your mission, should you choose to accept this ill-advised adventure, and let's be clear, it is ill-advised, is to make it to dawn in a medieval tavern. Just one night. 24 hours, give or take, without succumbing to death, dismemberment, crippling debt, or a permanent, rather inconvenient case of the plague. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Just pop in, have a pint, maybe some questionable stew, and saunter out at sunrise. If you truly believe that, then you, my friend, are ripe for historical disappointment. This isn't a game of Dungeons and Dragons where you can just roll a saving throw against dysentery. This is real life, medieval edition, and the dice are heavily weighted against your survival. Your biggest weapon? Naivete. And let's be honest, that's not going to get you very far when faced with a syphilitic cutpurse wielding a rusty shiv. The odds of you making it through without at least one existential crisis, 2 instances of projectile vomiting, and 3 near-death experiences involving both humans and possibly livestock are astronomically low. We're talking winning the lottery while simultaneously being struck by lightning and finding a unicorn low. So, good luck with that. You're going to need it. All of it. And then some. And even then, it probably won't be enough. Now, let's be precise about what we mean by survival. It's not just about keeping your physical form intact, although that's certainly a commendable primary objective. No, survival in this context is a holistic concept. It's mental survival, enduring the sheer tedium, the constant anxiety, the relentless assault on your senses without suffering a complete psychological break. It's emotional survival, maintaining some semblance of optimism or sanity in the face of widespread squalor, cruelty, and blatant disregard for human dignity. And let's not forget hygienic survival, emerging from the tavern without a burgeoning colony of fleas, a fresh rash, or the lingering scent of ancient despair permanently embedded in your clothes and hair. Good luck with all three. Your 21st century immune system, accustomed to sanitized surfaces and a steady diet of hand sanitizer, is already writing its will, probably in a trembling hand, with a last desperate plea for penicillin. It's like sending a meticulously groomed house cat into a lion's den and expecting it to emerge with its fur unruffled and its spirit undaunted. Spoiler alert. It will not. It will emerge, if at all, looking like it stared into the abyss, and the abyss stared back, then sneezed directly onto it. This isn't just about avoiding a knife fight. It's about avoiding the microscopic warfare waging on every surface, in every breath, and in every shared interaction. You're not just fighting against bandits. You're fighting against bacteria, fungi, parasites, and a general malaise that could seep into your very bones. Let's address the elephant in the poorly ventilated, rat-infested room. Your modern sensibilities are your biggest, most glaring weaknesses. You, with your perfectly pampered modern brain, your body that expects regular showers and clean clothes, and your personal hygiene standards that demand things like soap and running water. You're not just entering a pigsty, you're a delicate, exquisitely perfumed flower venturing into a cesspool. Your nose, accustomed to scented candles and artisanal air fresheners, is about to experience a rude, violent awakening. Your ears, used to noise-canceling headphones, are going to be assaulted by a symphony of drunken bellowing, animal grunts, and the rhythmic scratching of various patrons. Your eyes, accustomed to crisp HD displays, will struggle with the perpetual gloom and the flickering, smoke-choked light. Your expectation of personal space? Laughable. The very concept of privacy in a medieval tavern is as fantastical as a dragon doing your laundry. You'll be elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, and probably sharing a table with at least one person who looks like they've never encountered a bath in their entire miserable existence. Every instinct you possess, every comfort you take for granted, will be directly contradicted, challenged, and ultimately annihilated by the sheer, overwhelming reality of medieval life. You're a human vulnerability assessment, walking into an environment designed to exploit every single one of your weaknesses. And here's the kicker. It's not always the obvious threats that will get you. It's not just the brigands or the drunken brawlers, though they certainly play their part in ensuring your demise. No, the real killers are often the unseen, the insidious, the constant, grinding discomfort. It's the slow, creeping march of invisible microbes feasting on your unsuspecting immune system. It's the persistent itch from a flea bite that slowly drives you mad. It's the dull, throbbing headache from smoke inhalation and cheap ale that makes every moment a struggle. It's the stomach cramps from that mystery meat stew, the subtle signs of dysentery quietly setting up shop in your intestines. It's the sheer, relentless unpleasantness of it all. The damp, the cold, the heat, the stench, the noise, the grime that will slowly erode your will to live, long before any sword or disease delivers the final blow. You might not die dramatically in a heroic bar fight, but you'll probably die ignominiously on a pile of straw, regretting every single one of your life choices, especially the one that led you to believe this was a good idea. So, when we talk about not lasting a night, we're not just talking about surviving a physical assault. Lose. All right, so you've bravely decided to risk life and limb for a pint of dubious liquid. But before you even get to the fabled and soon-to-be dreaded tavern, you first have to navigate the medieval road system. And I use the term road in the loosest, most abstract sense possible. We're not talking about anything remotely resembling the paved, well-maintained thoroughfares you're accustomed to. No, these were more like suggestions for paths, often little more than glorified muddy tracks, carved out by centuries of animal hooves and peasant boots. Imagine a dirt path after a particularly heavy rain, then multiply the squelch and the general misery by about 1,000. These aren't just inconvenient, they're active obstacles, determined to delay you, dirty you, and potentially dismember you. Every single journey, no matter how short, felt like an epic saga, a mini odyssey, where the sirens sang of comfort and cleanliness, and the Cyclops was just a particularly aggressive local with a pitchfork. These roads were less about getting from point A to point B efficiently, and more about engaging in an involuntary, full-body workout involving balance, mud avoidance, and the occasional desperate scramble to avoid being swallowed whole by a sinkhole. It was an adventure, all right. A miserable, treacherous, utterly exhausting adventure. And who, you might ask, was responsible for the upkeep of these vital arteries of commerce and travel? The Public Works Department? A dedicated team of medieval road engineers? Oh, you naive, sweet summer child. There was no Public Works Department. There was no dedicated team. There was just nature, slowly but surely reclaiming what was briefly, poorly, and often grudgingly laid by a generation that had far more pressing concerns, like avoiding starvation or the plague. Maintenance was a foreign concept, a luxurious fantasy reserved for the Roman Empire, and even then, their roads eventually fell into glorious disrepair. So every rut and every puddle you encounter on your journey isn't just a simple imperfection. It holds centuries of questionable history. It's a testament to neglect, a repository of horse manure, human waste, and the occasional lost boot. Each muddy trough could have been a burial site, a forgotten battleground, or simply a place where someone's cartwheel snapped off, condemning them to a night under the stars with only the wolves for company. These roads were historical archives of despair, not smooth passages. They were organic, ever-changing entities, subject to the whims of the weather and the sheer indifference of humanity. A particularly heavy rain would transform a dirt track into a swamp, a minor stream into an impassable torrent. These were not engineered solutions. They were merely the paths of least resistance, worn down by generations of despot travel. What we consider a quick drive to the pub, a mere 10-minute jaunt in your climate-controlled steel box, would be an entirely different beast in the medieval era. A 10-mile journey could realistically take an entire day, sometimes longer, feeling like an odyssey of biblical proportions. Imagine walking 10 miles through deep mud, over treacherous terrain, with the constant threat of bad weather, highwaymen, and hungry beasts. Now imagine doing it in heavy, often ill-fitting, medieval clothing, with a pair of boots that probably gave you blisters before you even left your hovel. The concept of travel time was stretched and distorted, a fluid entity dictated by terrain, weather, and the speed of your slowest pack animal. Every mile was earned, every step a minor victory against the forces of friction and gravity. You weren't just covering distance, you were conquering it. A quick trip to the next village was a phrase uttered only by the truly optimistic or the dangerously delusional. It was an undertaking, an expedition, a testament to sheer stubbornness and the desperate need for whatever awaited you at your destination, no matter how squalid. And if the roads weren't enough to deter you, Mother Nature herself was usually doing her best to ensure you never reached your destination. We're talking environmental hazards that scoff at your modern GPS. Swamps that demand sacrifices, usually in the form of your boots, your dignity, and possibly your life. Forests teeming with unseen terrors, not just the wolves and bears we'll get to, but the feeling of being watched, the rustle in the undergrowth that could be anything from a rabbit to a vengeful spirit. And then there are the unbridged rivers. Oh, the rivers. These magnificent natural barriers scoffed at your desperate pleas for passage, their icy currents laughing at your pathetic attempts to ford them, or worse, their banks too muddy and steep to even attempt it. A simple rain shower could turn a trickling stream into a raging torrent, stranding you for days. These weren't just inconvenient natural features. They were active participants in your misery, silent gatekeepers of doom, lying in wait to swallow the unwary traveler. It's a fun day out, for the terrain, that is. It's having an absolute blast watching you struggle, swear, and slowly come to terms with the fact that your chances of reaching the tavern are dwindling with every squelch. So, you've navigated the mud and the metaphorical quicksand, you've wrestled with the indifferent rivers, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. Don't. Because the medieval countryside isn't just a physical obstacle course, it's also a thriving ecosystem of human and animal predators, all of whom view your journey as a personal invitation to theft, injury, or a rather undignified death. Let's start with the human element, the ever-present threat of brigands, highwaymen, and opportunistic peasants who view your mere existence as an invitation to theft. They're just trying to make a living, right? Your living, your meager coins, your slightly less filthy cloak, perhaps even your boots if they're feeling particularly discerning. These weren't cartoon villains with twirly mustaches. They were desperate men, often as hungry and cold as the beasts of the forest, willing to do whatever it took to survive. A quick smash to the head, a rusty blade to the gut, and your brief sojourn into the past is over before it even really began. And there's no 911 out here, no conveniently placed emergency call box. Just you, your increasingly poor decisions, and the unsettling realization that nobody's coming to help. You are, in essence, a mobile ATM for anyone with a sharper stick or a more menacing scowl. But wait, there's more. As if two-legged predators weren't enough, Mother Nature, in her infinite medieval wisdom, decided to throw in some four-legged ones for good measure. Animal encounters were not the heartwarming Disney moments you might imagine. We're talking wolves, bears, and aggressive wild boar. Oh my. These weren't shy creatures. They were apex predators, emboldened by hunger and a distinct lack of human intervention. A wolf pack could easily pick off a lone traveler. A bear could turn you into an impromptu snack, and a wild boar could disembowel you with terrifying efficiency. And let's not forget the less dramatic, but equally dangerous threats. Rabid dogs, whose foaming jaws carried a death sentence, or venomous snakes lurking in the undergrowth, waiting to deliver a silent, agonizing demise. Mother Nature wants you dead too, apparently. She sees your soft, modern flesh and thinks, ah, a new flavor of protein. You are, to the medieval ecosystem, a walking, breathing, slightly clumsy buffet. Every rustle in the bushes, every snap of a twig, will send a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror through your modern, flight or flight conditioned nervous system. Your self-preservation instincts, finely tuned for avoiding traffic and awkward social interactions, are utterly unprepared for an actual confrontation with something that wants to eat you. And just when you thought the physical threats were enough, let's sprinkle in a healthy dose of medieval paranoia. Because beyond the bandits and the beasts, there's the supernatural threat, or at least the superstitious fear of it. Ghosts of the unquiet dead, fairies, and these aren't the sparkly, benevolent kind from children's stories. These are the malevolent trickster sprites who delight in leading you astray or driving you mad. Witches, brewing potions in hidden clearings, and other things that go bump in the dark, according to every terrified local you might encounter. Even if you, a beacon of modern enlightenment, don't believe in them, the fear of them is very real, very pervasive, and can be just as debilitating as a physical attack. The local peasants will swear on their last crust of bread that the old oak tree whispers curses, or that the bog is haunted by the wails of lost travelers. And you, hearing these tales in the flickering firelight, miles from any comfort, with the wind howling like a mournful spirit, might just start to believe them too. Paranoia is contagious, especially in the dark. And finally, the cherry on top of this miserable cake, the utter, soul-crushing lack of help. No AAA, no roadside assistance, no cell service to dial for help. Just you, your pathetic sword, if you even remembered to bring one, and if you even know how to use it without immediately slicing off a finger, and your increasingly poor decisions. If you fall, if you're injured, if you're robbed, if you're attacked by a wolf, you are entirely, completely, utterly on your own. There's no passing Samaritan, no friendly farmer with a spare wheel. Your only hope is that you stumble upon another traveler who is either equally desperate or surprisingly charitable, which, let's be honest, are rare commodities in an age of survival. You are adrift in a sea of indifference, where the only thing that cares about your plight is the carrion bird circling overhead, patiently waiting for nature to take its course. It's a stark, brutal reminder that in the medieval world, self-reliance wasn't a virtue. It was the only option. And for your soft, modern self, that's a death sentence wrapped in a really unappealing burlap sack. Congratulations! You've made it this far without being eaten or mugged. But now, the sun is beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of blood orange and bruised purple. And as the last sliver of daylight vanishes, you are about to experience true darkness. Forget your darkest nights spent in a suburban backyard, or the glow of distant streetlights, or the ambient light pollution from the nearest city still filters through. No, this is an oppressive, inky blackness that swallows all hope and visibility. It's the kind of dark that feels physical, a heavy blanket pressed against your eyes. The moon, if it deigns to show its face, is fickle, often obscured by clouds, and the stars, while beautiful, offer little practical illumination for navigating treacherous terrain. It's a profound, primal darkness that reminds you exactly how fragile and vulnerable you are, stripped of the comforting artificial light sources you take for granted. Every shadow becomes a lurking monster, every rustle a predator. You are blind, disoriented, and utterly at the mercy of your terrified imagination. It's less a night sky and more a cosmic blindfold designed to amplify every other terrifying aspect of the medieval wilderness. And with that profound darkness comes an equally profound risk, getting hopelessly lost. It's remarkably easy to stray from the barely there path, to wander off into a treacherous ditch you couldn't possibly see, or to simply vanish without a trace, becoming another quaint, albeit deeply disturbing, medieval disappearance story that the locals will whisper about for generations. Remember poor Agnes? Went to fetch water after dusk, never seen again. Must have been the bog witches. Your modern sense of direction, so reliant on GPS and clearly marked signs, is absolutely useless here. There are no luminous path markers, no reflective street signs, no friendly glow from distant buildings to guide you. Every step is a gamble, a blind trust that the ground beneath your feet won't suddenly give way or lead you into an even worse predicament. The landscape itself seems to conspire against you, the familiar landmarks of daylight disappearing into a uniform, terrifying blackness. You could walk in circles for hours, slowly succumbing to despair, cold, and the horrifying realization that you are utterly, hopelessly alone in a world that genuinely does not care about your plight. As if the ambient terror of medieval night wasn't enough, darkness also ratchets up the danger quotient to 11. Bandits and beasts, already a charming feature of medieval travel, thrive under the cloak of night. They gain confidence, stealth, and an unfair advantage. You, fumbling blindly through the undergrowth, are a walking, breathing, delicious target, practically announcing your presence with every terrified stumble. A highwayman who might hesitate in broad daylight becomes a phantom menace under the shroud of darkness, able to strike without warning, disappearing back into the blackness before you even register what's happened. Wolves, whose eyes gleam in the starlight, stalk you with renewed vigor, their howls carrying a more sinister edge in the oppressive quiet of the night. You are a vulnerability, a source of light in a world of shadow, drawing all the wrong attention from all the wrong things. The night doesn't just conceal, it empowers the predators and disorients the prey. And guess which one you are? So, what's your grand plan for illumination, you intrepid explorer? Your only source of light, a flickering, smoky lantern. And let's be brutally honest about this antiquated piece of technology. It primarily serves two purposes. First, to attract every single nocturnal insect within a 5-mile radius, ensuring a delightful swarm around your face. And second, to illuminate your impending doom with just enough hazy light to make it vaguely visible without offering any real sense of security or safety. It's a beacon for trouble, a tiny, struggling declaration of, "Here I am, an easily robbed and probably tasty snack." It throws long, dancing shadows that make everything look more terrifying than it already is, turning mundane bushes into monstrous figures and familiar paths into labyrinthine horrors. The feeble glow offers no real protection, merely a false sense of security that quickly dissipates with every unexpected sound. It's not a tool for navigation, it's a spotlight for your vulnerability, an advertisement for your helplessness. Your journey into the medieval night is not just a walk. It's a terrifying, blindfolded crawl through a nightmare, illuminated by a sputtering candle that seems to mock your every desperate step. Miraculously, you've survived the journey through the wilderness. You haven't been eaten, robbed, or driven mad by the fear of bog witches. Now, a faint glow appears on the horizon, the promise of a town, a tavern, and a brief respite from the horrors of the road. But don't pop the celebratory, probably stale breadcrumb-filled cork just yet, because entering a medieval town is not like pulling into a quaint village square. Oh no, it's a whole new level of sensory assault and potential peril, a new kind of urban jungle that makes the previous dangers feel almost pastoral. First, you're greeted by the imposing city walls. These formidable structures, often made of stone, look impressive, and indeed, they theoretically offer protection from outside threats. Marauding armies, rampaging beasts, particularly aggressive tax collectors. But they are a mixed blessing. While they might keep the wolves out, they also create critical bottlenecks for everything inside. They funnel people, livestock, and merchants into a concentrated space, which, unfortunately, also means concentrating disease, crowds, and potential crime. Think of it as a historical pressure cooker, where all the unsavory elements are simply simmering together, waiting for a chance to boil over. The walls provide security for the privileged and a convenient trap for everyone else. At these very walls, you'll encounter the gates and guards. And let me tell you, these aren't the friendly, welcoming faces of a small-town sheriff. No, these are suspicious glares, often accompanied by well-honed distrust. You'll likely face potential tolls, which, let's be honest, you might not have, or might have foolishly been relieved of by our friends the highwaymen. And then there's the ever-present threat of being denied entry for no good reason whatsoever. Your face doesn't fit. You look like you're carrying the Black Death. We just don't like your shoes. Hope you brought your paperwork. What paperwork, you ask? Precisely. There was no standardized ID, no simple passport. You might need a letter of passage, a guild affiliation, or simply a convincing story and a handful of coins to grease the right palms. If you're a stranger, especially one looking a bit worse for wear, which, after your journey, you undoubtedly will, you're immediately a person of interest, and not the good kind. You're a potential spy, a vagrant, a carrier of plague, or simply a nuisance. Don't expect a red carpet. Expect a raised eyebrow and a hand on a sword hilt. Once, or if, you make it past the gates, you are immediately plunged into the very heart of medieval filth. The streets are not merely dirty. They are filthy streets 2.0, an open sewer system on steroids, an olfactory assault of epic proportions. Imagine animal waste from horses, pigs, and chickens, human waste from overflowing chamber pots tossed out windows, rotting garbage festering in every alleyway, and the effluent from various artisanal trades, tanning, butchering, dyeing, all combining into a charming urban aroma that will cling to your nostrils like a clingy X. Watch where you step, or don't, because no matter how careful you are, you're going to step in something unidentifiable, probably squishy, and definitely organic. Your pristine modern shoes, which you might have foolishly worn, are now irrevocably stained with centuries of questionable history. This isn't just a bad smell, it's a living, breathing, festering entity that permeates every inch of the urban landscape. It's the scent of life, death, and profound indifference to sanitation, all rolled into one nauseating package. And then there's the crowd. The overcrowding. Hordes of people, livestock meandering freely, merchants hawking their wares, often in equally unsanitary conditions, and beggars vying for space, all jostling and pushing and shoving. Welcome to Personal Space Invasion, 14th Century Edition. Forget social distancing. That concept wouldn't even be invented until 2020, and even then, people struggled with it. In a medieval town, you are constantly, relentlessly, inescapably surrounded. You'll feel the press of unwashed bodies, the brush of questionable cloaks, the jostle of strangers who have no concept of personal boundaries. It's a swirling vortex of humanity, a cacophony of sound and smell and movement, designed to overwhelm and disorient. You're not just an individual. You're a component in a living, breathing, incredibly unhygienic organism. And somewhere in this chaotic maelstrom, you're supposed to find a tavern. Good luck. You're going to need more than luck. You're going to need a very strong stomach, an even stronger sense of direction, and an almost suicidal disregard for your personal well-being. You've braved the roads, navigated the urban sewer system, and somehow avoided losing your entire worldly possessions or contracting an immediate fatal illness. Congratulations! Now you're finally approaching the tavern. But before you even glimpse its ramshackle exterior, before you hear the muffled sounds of drunken revelry, you'll be greeted by its true herald, the prevailing odor. It's not just a smell, it's an experience, a delightful bouquet of stale beer, unwashed bodies, wood smoke, rancid food, overflowing latrines, and whatever unspeakable offerings the street outside has to contribute to the overall ambiance. This isn't a subtle aroma that you might politely ignore. It's a full frontal olfactory assault, a chemical weapon disguised as ambiance. It's the scent of desperation, of neglect, of profound and pervasive biological processes allowed to run unchecked. Your modern nose, accustomed to the subtle notes of freshly brewed coffee and artisanal scented candles, is about to enter a dimension of pure, unadulterated putrescence. You'll gag. You'll wince. you'll question every single life choice that led you to this moment. This isn't just a generic bad smell, it's the distinctive aroma of the medieval tavern. You'll smell it before you see it, before you hear it, before you even fully comprehend the depth of your mistake. It's the scent of good times. If good times means bacterial colonization, a slow descent into respiratory illness, and the faint, persistent whisper of regret. It's a complex layering of human efflua, fermented grains gone sour, the clinging ash of 1,000 fires, and the indescribable tang of concentrated waste. Imagine a public toilet that's been abandoned for a decade, a frat house basement after a particularly epic party, and a tannery, all mixed together in a blender and then wafted directly into your unsuspecting nostrils. That's the kind of distinctive signature we're talking about. It's an aroma that screams disease vector and poor life choices in equal measure. There are notes of stale sweat, unwashed hair, unemptied chamber pots, spilled ale that's gone utterly, horrifyingly sour, and the faint, unsettling aroma of something unidentifiable that might have once been alive. Your modern olfactory senses, finely tuned for discerning the subtle differences between different brands of organic oat milk, are in for a rude, brutal awakening. This is olfactory overload, a sensory blitzkrieg designed to overwhelm and incapacitate. Try not to vomit. Seriously, try very, very hard. Firstly, because it's considered incredibly rude in a setting where decorum is already hanging by a thread, and secondly, because you'll regret the wasted effort. That vomit will only add to the prevailing stench, and you'll have to smell your own existential despair for the rest of the night. Your stomach will lurch, your eyes might water, and your brain will scream and protest, begging for the sweet release of a properly ventilated, air-conditioned room. But there is no escape. The stench is a physical presence, a palpable entity that wraps around you and attempts to burrow into your very being. It's not just in the air, it feels like it's in the air you breathe, on your skin, inside your clothes. It's inescapable. And here's the most delightful part. This isn't just an aroma you'll experience while you're there. Oh no, dear traveler. This is a scent that clings. This is a scent that will become part of you. It will embed itself in your clothes, permeating the fabric with an intensity that no amount of medieval washing, which, let's be honest, would be laughably ineffective anyway, could ever remove. It will cling to your hair, a pungent halo of historical squalor. It will seep into your skin, a faint, lingering whisper of putrescence that will follow you home. You'll catch whiffs of it days later, a ghostly reminder of your unfortunate foray into the past, sparking phantom nausea and an overwhelming desire to burn all your belongings. You won't just visit the Medieval Tavern. The Medieval Tavern will visit with you for a long, unwelcome stay. It's the ultimate souvenir, a fragrant trophy of your poor judgment. And every time you accidentally catch a whiff of that familiar, horrifying bouquet, you'll remember this night, and you'll curse me for putting you through it. You're welcome. All right, you've survived the smell, barely. Now, your eyes finally adjust through the smoke and tears of existential dread, and you behold the architectural masterpiece that is the Medieval Tavern exterior. Spoiler alert, it's not a masterpiece. Often, it's a repurposed home, sometimes multiple homes awkwardly cobbled together, leaning precariously against its neighbors, patched with whatever scrap materials were available, mismatched timber, crumbling wattle and daub, perhaps a section of repurposed barrel staves. Structural integrity is not a design principle here. It's merely a suggestion, a faint hope whispered on the wind. The building often sags in the middle, as if weary from centuries of holding up dubious architectural decisions. The roof might be missing tiles, leaving gaping holes for rain, snow, and intrepid pigeons to enter. The walls might show signs of water damage, or worse, rodent activity. It has a general air of barely holding it together neglect, a testament to an era where functionality trumped aesthetics and building codes were merely whimsical suggestions. Charming, isn't it? It's less a place of business and more a monument to the resilience of shoddy craftsmanship. And what about the sign, the proud emblem declaring this establishment's purpose? Forget anything slick or professionally designed. Literacy was a luxury, a skill possessed by a precious few, certainly not the average peasant looking for a pint. So expect a crude, often faded, painted image depicting something instantly recognizable. You might see The Pig and Whistle, featuring a pig looking vaguely constipated and a whistle that appears to be melting. Or perhaps The Drunken Monk, a plump, red-faced cleric spilling ale down his robes, somehow managing to look both pious and utterly debauched. Or, for the truly discerning palate, Ye Old Diseased Rat, perhaps a statement on the quality of their clientele or their menu. Don't expect subtlety, don't expect artistry, and certainly don't expect anything that inspires confidence in the establishment's offerings. These signs are less an advertisement and more a warning, a crude visual shorthand for enter at your own risk and prepare to have your expectations dramatically lowered. The paint is peeling, the wood is splintered, and the entire thing usually swings precariously in the wind, threatening to detach and brain an unsuspecting passerby at any moment. As you approach, the general cacophony that you glimpsed from the city streets now becomes distinct. You're hit by the ambient noise spillage, a symphony of medieval debauchery pouring out onto the street. Drunken singing, usually off-key and belligerent, punctuated by raucous laughter that sounds more like hyenas than humans. Heated arguments, escalating from grumbling to shouting matches, punctuated by the occasional crash of something breaking inside. The general commotion spills out, an undeniable invitation to chaos. It's less a welcoming sound and more an auditory warning siren, broadcasting the internal mayhem to anyone within earshot. You can hear the thud of heavy mugs, the scraping of chairs, the occasional yelp of pain, and the rhythmic scratching that probably indicates a flea problem of epic proportions. This isn't background music. It's an active, aggressive soundscape designed to overwhelm your senses and prepare you for the glorious bedlam within. Every decibel is a testament to the uninhibited, unrefined nature of medieval social gatherings. And tying all of this together is a general air of profound disrepair. Cracked window panes, if there are any at all, often stuffed with rags or covered with animal hide. Paint, if it ever had any, is peeling in forlorn strips, revealing the raw, weathered timber beneath. The doorframe might be askew, the threshold worn down by countless dirty boots. There's a distinct lack of care, a general air of neglect that screams, "We have bigger fish to fry than aesthetics." This isn't just cosmetic. It speaks to a deeper truth about the priorities of the age. Comfort, cleanliness, and visual appeal were luxuries. Survival, sustenance, and cheap intoxication were necessities. So the tavern, in all its ramshackle glory, reflects this perfectly. It's a testament to practicality over pleasantness, a monument to the medieval ethos of it works mostly. Charming, indeed, in a way that makes you want to immediately turn around and run screaming back to the comfort of your own century. It's easy to think of a medieval tavern as simply a place to drink, and while copious amounts of questionable ale were certainly consumed, the tavern was far more than just a medieval bar. It was the internet of its age, the social media platform, the news channel, and the illicit dark web, all rolled into one smoky, pungent package. It was the primary information exchange center for locals and travelers alike. All the gossip, all the news, local, regional, and wildly embellished, all the rumors, often starting as mild exaggerations and quickly snowballing into full-blown conspiracies, and all the wildly inaccurate information you could ever want flowed through these doors. Listen closely, but believe absolutely nothing. A traveler might have just arrived from a distant town, bringing tales of a new tax, a miraculous healing, or a gruesome public execution. A local peasant might be whispering about Lord Bartholomew's philandering ways, or the strange lights seen in the forest. This was where narratives were forged, where reputations were made or destroyed, and where the mundane often twisted into the mythical. It was a buzzing hive of human communication, utterly unfiltered and deliciously unreliable. Beyond the exchange of dubious information, the tavern was also a bustling center for business deals and swindles. Agreements were struck, contracts, often oral and therefore easily repudiated, were made, and nefarious plots were hatched over flagons of watery ale. This was where merchants haggled over prices, where farmers negotiated for seed, and where, more often than not, someone was trying to fleece someone else. Caveat emptor, buyer beware, takes on a whole new, brutal meaning when your parchment isn't worth the paper it's written on, and the man you just shook hands with might well be a notorious con artist. You could witness the buying and selling of livestock, land, or even indentured service. You could overhear discussions about the best routes for smuggling goods, the weakest points in a local lord's defenses, or the going rate for a discreet removal service. The clinking of coin often accompanied the whispered words of profit and deceit. It was a marketplace of opportunity, often for the morally flexible, and definitely for the ruthlessly ambitious. The tavern truly functioned as a social nexus, a reluctant melting pot where disparate elements of society were forced to rub shoulders and share diseases. From the lowliest peasant seeking a brief respite from a back-breaking existence, to the traveling merchant with a purse full of coins, to the occasional knight or minor noble passing through, everyone found themselves under the same smoky roof. Here, the strict social hierarchies of the outside world were temporarily, if awkwardly, blurred. A peasant might find himself sitting adjacent to a wealthy merchant, an unlikely transient moment of forced community. It was a space where status could still be inferred, but the immediate needs of drink, food, and shelter often superseded strict social protocols. This meant an unusual mix of dialects, dress, and demeanors, creating a vibrant, if intensely crowded, tapestry of medieval life. Everyone, regardless of their station, was united by the basic human desires for sustenance, companionship, and oblivion. And for the weary traveler, the tavern served as a temporary refuge, a brief, dangerous respite from the even greater horrors of the road. After braving bandits, beasts, and the brutal indifference of nature, the tavern, for all its faults, was a place with 4 walls, a roof, and some form of sustenance. It was like choosing between a knife and a slightly blunter knife. Neither option was ideal, but one offered a slightly higher chance of not bleeding out immediately. It was a haven, albeit one filled with its own unique perils. Here, you could, theoretically, find a place to sleep, even if it was on a straw pallet shared with a dozen strangers and their fleas, a bite to eat, even if it was a dubious stew, and a drink to numb the pain, even if it guaranteed a ferocious hangover. It was a pause in the endless struggle for survival, a chance to gather strength, exchange information, and prepare for the next leg of a relentlessly difficult journey. A dangerous sanctuary, a necessary evil, a place where the promise of temporary comfort often came with a hefty, invisible price tag. You've made it. You've somehow navigated the stench-filled streets and the suspicious glares. You stand before the imposing, or perhaps just dangerously leaning, tavern door. It's heavy, probably scarred from countless brawls, forced entries, and the casual abuse of generations of patrons. The hinges creak in protest as you push it open, a sound that echoes ominously in the sudden silence that follows. It's less a welcome, more a challenge, a portal to another dimension where all your modern sensibilities will be systematically dismantled. This isn't a quaint pub entrance. It's the gateway to an experience that will redefine your understanding of discomfort. The wood itself feels ancient, slick with an indefinable grime, perhaps even showing scorch marks from some long-forgotten fire. It doesn't invite, it merely tolerates your presence, much like the patrons within. The moment that door swings open, you're hit. Not by a person, not by a fist, not yet anyway, but by a physical wave of oppressive heat, deafening noise, and a wall of stench that hits you like a medieval battering ram. It's a multi-sensory shockwave. The heat, generated by the open hearth and the sheer body warmth of a packed room, is stifling, a stark contrast to the often chilly exterior. The noise, a raw, undiluted cacophony of shouting, laughter, arguments, and animal sounds, assaults your eardrums, making any coherent thought impossible. And the stench, that potent, unforgettable aroma of stale beer, unwashed bodies, smoke, and human waste, wraps around you, filling your lungs and making your eyes water. It's an immediate, overwhelming assault on every single one of your senses, designed to remind you, within milliseconds, that you have made a terrible, terrible mistake. Your modern system, accustomed to temperature control and noise dampening, simply has no frame of reference for this level of raw, unmitigated sensory overload. You're not just stepping into a room, you're stepping into an aggressive, all-encompassing experience. And then, every head turns. The collective gaze of every single person in the tavern swivels towards you. You're the newcomer, the fresh face, the potential mark, the stranger to be eyed with suspicion, curiosity, or outright hostility. Enjoy the intense, suspicious scrutiny from every single corner of the room. Every pair of eyes, some bloodshot, some narrowed in calculation, some simply glazed over with drink, fixes on you. You feel their assessment, their judgment, their silent weighing of your worth, as a potential friend, an easy target, or a future adversary. This isn't a welcoming glance, it's a predatory assessment. You might catch the glint of a knife hilt, the quick dart of a thief's eye towards your purse, or the vacant, unsettling stare of a local drunk who sees you as a potential audience for his incoherent ramblings. It's an unnerving, palpable weight, making you feel instantly vulnerable and acutely aware of your status as an outsider. Your personal bubble, that invisible shield of modern social etiquette, has just been violently popped. With that collective stare still burning holes through you, the immediate struggle begins finding a spot. You have to navigate the crowded, dimly lit room without tripping over a sleeping drunkard slumped on the floor, stepping in something unidentifiable and squishy, which, let's be honest, is an inevitability, or accidentally offending a local brute who guards his territory with the ferocity of a territorial badger. The floor is uneven, slick with spilled ale, and mystery grime. Obstacles abound. Precariously balanced stools, discarded bones, puddles of unknown origin, and the occasional live animal wandering underfoot. Every step is a delicate dance between maintaining balance and avoiding direct physical contact with someone you'd rather not touch. It's an immediate test of your spatial awareness and your ability to project an aura of "don't mess with me," even when your internal monologue is screaming, "I want my mommy and a hazmat suit." The tavern doesn't accommodate you. You must fight for your place within its chaotic, grimy embrace. You're inside now, and the initial wave of sensory assault has settled into a persistent, all-encompassing reality. Let's talk about the air you breathe, which, if you're a discerning individual who prefers oxygen to a complex cocktail of airborne pathogens and particulate matter, is going to be a real problem. First up, the smoke-filled room. Imagine a particularly enthusiastic campfire, brought indoors, with minimal to no ventilation, and then add the constant plumes from cheap, sputtering tallow lamps and countless pipes or rudimentary cigarettes, if tobacco is introduced. Your lungs, accustomed to HEPA filters and the crisp, clean air of a climate-controlled office, will immediately stage a protest. They will burn, they will ache, and they will thank you for this experience by collapsing in a fit of chronic bronchitis. The smoke isn't just an inconvenience. It's a thick, tangible presence, hanging in the air like a ghostly shroud, clinging to every surface and every person. It's the kind of smoke that makes your eyes water uncontrollably, stinging and blurring your vision, forcing you to squint through the perpetual haze. Every breath is a conscious effort, a grim negotiation with your own respiratory system. Layered beneath and intertwining with the smoke is the undeniable symphony of body odor. Personal hygiene, as you might have gathered, was not a priority for the average medieval citizen. Bathing was infrequent, often a luxury, and for many, an unnecessary chore. So imagine a rich, layered mix of sweat, unwashed clothing worn for days, weeks, or even months without a proper clean, and the general human effluvium of dozens, if not hundreds of people packed into a small, hot, unventilated space. It's not just a smell. It's a smell that has character. It tells a story of hard labor, scarce water, and a profound indifference to the delicate sensibilities of the modern nose. Notes of stale armpit, unwashed hair, Damp wool and perhaps a faint hint of something vaguely fecal will waft your way, combining into a truly unique and deeply unsettling bouquet. Your carefully applied modern deodorant will wave its white flag of surrender within minutes, overwhelmed by the sheer, relentless power of medieval stench. But we're not done yet. To complete this olfactory masterpiece, let's add the pungent contribution of food and feces odors. Imagine stale bread, slowly fermenting on tables, mixing with the aroma of boiling, unidentifiable stews that have been simmering for what feels like geological ages. Throw in the scent of slowly rotting garbage piled in a corner, waiting for someone to get around to emptying it. Spoiler, they probably won't tonight. And then the faint, persistent, utterly unmistakable tang of the nearby latrine, whether it's an outdoor privy that's overflowing and wafting its bounty through an open window, or, God forbid, an indoor communal bucket tucked away in a dimly lit corner. These aren't separate, distinct smells. They all blend into a seamless, pervasive, utterly nauseating whole. It's a sensory assault that will trigger your gag reflex with unsettling regularity, forcing you to develop a sophisticated mental defense mechanism of holding your breath, or simply accepting your fate as a passive recipient of historical putrescence. And this, my dear, long-suffering listener, is the overarching tavern smell. It's a unique bouquet, a signature fragrance of the medieval experience that clings to your clothes, your hair, and your very soul for days, possibly weeks after your ordeal. You won't just experience the tavern, you'll carry the tavern with you. It will become a part of your aura, an invisible but very potent cloud of historical grime that silently screams, "I have seen things, smelled things, and deeply regret everything." Every time you brush your hair, every time you shift in your clothes, you'll catch a faint whiff of that particular blend of smoke, sweat, stale ale, and general human decay. It's the ultimate souvenir, a fragrant reminder of a truly terrible night out. So enjoy this unique olfactory journey. It's a smell that screams authenticity, which, in this context, is just another word for abject horror. You will yearn for the simple, unadulterated scent of industrial-strength disinfectant. But alas, that, like so many other pleasantries, is centuries away. Having survived the olfactory onslaught, your eyes now attempt to make sense of your surroundings. And here, you're greeted by the perpetual twilight of the medieval tavern. Forget the bright, evenly distributed illumination you're used to. Lighting sources were rudimentary, dangerous, and utterly insufficient. We're talking open fires in the hearth, sputtering tallow candles dripping wax onto every available surface, and perhaps a greasy, smoky oil lamp or two, often fueled by questionable animal fat. All of them dim, all of them smoky, all of them casting long, dancing shadows, and all of them dangerously flammable in a building made primarily of dried wood and straw. It's an environment of constant fire risk, where one drunken lurch could plunge the entire establishment into fiery chaos. The light isn't merely functional, it's a dramatic, flickering presence, barely warding off the encroaching darkness. The result is a dim and dangerous environment, where barely enough light penetrates the gloom to allow you to see clearly. This isn't just atmospheric, it's a practical hazard. Tripping over an unseen obstacle is commonplace. Accidental spills of your already questionable ale are an inevitability. And mistaken identities, leading to a punch in the face or an unwarranted accusation, are a regular feature of the evening. The gloom is a tactical advantage for the less savory elements of society. It's perfect for hiding nefarious deeds, for making a quick snatch from a purse, or for slipping away unnoticed after stirring up trouble. Your eyes, accustomed to crisp, high-definition clarity, will strain to make sense of the murky surroundings. Every face is half obscured, every corner a potential hiding place for something or someone you'd rather not encounter. The tavern is a realm of blurred edges and uncertain forms, where reality itself feels hazy and indistinct. Indeed, this environment of shadows and secrets is ideal for clandestine dealings and lurking figures. It's a gloom designed to obfuscate, to conceal, to make the unsavory aspects of the tavern's operations slightly less visible. You might catch a fleeting glimpse of a whispered conversation in a dark corner, a quick exchange of something illicit, or a shadowy figure slipping between tables with unnerving stealth. It's also incredibly effective at hiding just how truly disgusting the floor is. In this murky half-light, the layer of grime, the discarded food scraps, the pools of spilled liquid, and the various unidentifiable stains are mercifully obscured, allowing your imagination to fill in the probably worse blanks. It's a masterful exercise in visual deception, making the unbearable slightly more bearable by simply making it harder to see. But your mind knows, doesn't it? Your brain, despite the visual obscuration, can sense the underlying squalor, making the dimness an accomplice to your escalating unease. And for your modern eyes, accustomed to abundant, clear, and perfectly consistent light from LED screens and overhead fluorescents, this perpetual twilight will be a genuine struggle. Eye strain is not just a possibility, it's a guarantee. Your pupils will dilate to their maximum, trying desperately to gather any available photon, leading to a constant dull ache behind your eyes. Headaches are not just a guarantee, they're a foregone conclusion. The combination of smook, dimness, and the constant effort to perceive your surroundings will quickly take its toll, making your skull feel like it's being gently, or not so gently, squeezed in a medieval vice. You'll find yourself blinking repeatedly, rubbing your temples, and longing for the simple, pure, unadulterated clarity of daylight, or even the harsh, uncompromising glare of a modern interrogation room. Anything would be better than this blurry, smoky, headache-inducing gloom. If your eyes are straining and your nose is protesting, prepare your ears for the full frontal assault of the Medieval Tavern's soundscape. This isn't background ambience. It's a full-throated, unrelenting cacophony, a symphony of human and animal misery. The roar of the crowd is constant, an oceanic surge of sound. Shouting, bellowing laughter that sounds more like a mating call of an enraged beast. Heated arguments escalating to the verge of violence. Off-key, drunken singing that would make a banshee sound like a virtuoso. All of it happening at once, relentlessly, without pause or mercy. It's a wall of sound, so dense and pervasive that it's impossible to pick out individual conversations or even hear your own thoughts. It's a sensory battering ram designed to overwhelm and disorient, rendering coherent communication a futile exercise. Your ears will ring, your head will pound, and you will quickly realize that the quiet sanctuary of your noise-canceling headphones is a modern luxury of almost unimaginable proportions. And just when you think you've heard it all, let's add in the charming animal sounds. Stray dogs, emaciated and opportunistic, scavenging for dropped scraps, occasionally yelping as they get kicked or step in something unpleasant. Scavenging cats, slinking through the shadows, occasionally hissing at a rival or a clumsy patron. Clucking chickens, sometimes wandering in from the street, adding their own feathered contribution to the din. Perhaps even a rogue pig or goat, driven indoors by curiosity or the lure of dropped food. They're not just outside, they're part of the furniture, part of the living, breathing, incredibly unhygienic ecosystem of the tavern. They add another layer of chaotic, unpredictable noise to the already overwhelming din, further eroding any possibility of peace or quiet. Their presence is a constant reminder that this isn't a pristine, human-only environment. It's a shared space, a microcosm of the medieval world's close, often uncomfortably intimate, relationship with its livestock. Amidst the human and animal chorus, you also get the clanking and clattering of the actual establishment. Heavy earthenware mugs hitting tables with a resounding thud, wooden plates being scraped clean, or at least scraped at with rudimentary utensils, the general din of a busy, incredibly uncivilized establishment. The scraping of benches, the shuffling of feet, the occasional crash of something falling and breaking, all of it contributes to the chaotic soundscape. It's the sound of functionality, of purpose, but filtered through the lens of medieval disregard for finesse or acoustic engineering. These sounds aren't crisp and clean, they're dull, heavy, and resonant, amplified by the low ceilings and crowded space, further compounding the auditory assault on your already strained senses. And the most important takeaway from this symphony of misery, there is no escape. Noise pollution was a constant, inescapable feature of medieval life, especially in a tavern. You can't retreat to a quiet corner. There isn't one. You can't put on headphones. They don't exist. You are trapped in a relentless barrage of sound, a constant hum of human and animal activity that will slowly, surely, erode your sanity. Your ears will ring for days afterward, carrying a phantom echo of the tavern's relentless din. Sleep, if you manage it, will be a fitful, constantly interrupted affair, punctuated by the sounds of the establishment and its patrons. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a form of torture, a relentless sonic assault that will leave you craving the sweet, blessed silence of an empty, sterile room. And you, with your delicate modern hearing, are utterly unprepared for it. All right, you've somehow pushed past the sensory assault at the door and found yourself in the main common room. Now, about finding a place to sit. Forget your modern concepts of personal space, individual tables, or ergonomically designed chairs. You're in a medieval tavern where comfort is a foreign concept and efficiency of packing bodies into a small space is paramount. You'll be crammed onto long, shared benches or perched precariously on wobbly, often three-legged stools. You will be touching strangers. Their elbows will be in your ribs, their knees will be knocking against yours, and you will be intimately familiar with the various odors emanating from their unwashed bodies and clothing. There's no escaping it. Personal boundaries are a concept that simply hasn't evolved yet. You're part of a human sardine can, packed in tight, sharing body heat, bodily fluids, and perhaps even a few fleas. These seating options are, without exception, of the roughest possible construction. Think unfinished, untreated wood, often crudely hacked into shape. You can practically feel the imminent threat of splinters just by looking at them. The edges are rough, the surfaces uneven, and the angles are designed for utility, not comfort or safety. Many a patron likely left with a painful reminder of their evening etched into their posterior. These benches and stools aren't just uncomfortable, they're minor instruments of torture, designed to discourage lingering and perhaps even subtly encourage you to drink more to numb the physical discomfort. Structural integrity, much like the building itself, is merely a suggestion. A sudden shift, a drunken lurch, and you might find your precarious perch collapsing beneath you, sending you tumbling into the unidentifiable filth on the floor. It's a constant, low-level anxiety, a physical manifestation of the overall precariousness of medieval life. And these surfaces? Oh, they are a treasure trove of historical grime. Expect to sit in the residue of countless previous patrons, spilled drinks that have long since dried into sticky, dark patches, dried food remnants that have achieved a geological permanence, and whatever mysterious bodily fluids have accumulated over weeks, months, or even years. It's a living archive of disgustingness, a historical stew of human DNA, bacteria, and forgotten sorrows. You're not just sitting on a bench, you're sitting on a tapestry of collective medieval effluvia. And unlike modern establishments that might wipe down a table, the concept of cleaning these communal benches was probably limited to an occasional, desultory sweep with a straw broom. Any lingering wetness is simply allowed to evaporate, leaving behind an even more concentrated layer of filth. You'll feel the stickiness, the grittiness, the inexplicable dampness, and you'll silently mourn for the pristine cleanliness of your home sofa. And if you're particularly unlucky, or if you arrive late to the party, you might find yourself with no seating at all. Standing room only is a common medieval phenomenon, especially in a popular tavern. So, after your arduous journey, after navigating the filthy streets and the crowded interior, you get to spend the rest of your evening on your feet, jostled by drunken patrons, enduring foot pain that will make your modern arch supports weep in sympathy. Enjoy your misery, you privileged modern softy. You thought you were just going for a drink. You're now participating in an involuntary endurance test. Your legs will ache, your back will protest, and your desire for a proper seat will become an obsessive, all-consuming quest. But alas, there are no padded bar stools here, no empty booths waiting for your weary posterior, just the hard, unforgiving ground and the knowledge that your feet are slowly but surely turning into painful medieval-grade blisters. So you've managed to secure a spot, possibly even a coveted seat at a table. But don't celebrate just yet, because the tables themselves are another frontier of medieval horror. These are not merely surfaces. They are archaeological digs of disgustingness, layered with centuries of spilled drinks, dried food, and whatever else has splattered, congealed, and festered. The sticky surfaces are a testament to chronic neglect, a living, breathing archive of culinary and alcoholic misadventures. Run your hand across the rough-hewn wood. Don't actually do this for the love of all that is holy, and you'll feel the palpable history of generations of spillage, each layer adding to the overall stickiness and the rich, complex aroma of fermented despair. It's not just a little sticky. It's the kind of sticky that makes you wonder if you'll ever be able to retrieve your elbow from the tabletop. And as for wiping, what's that? The concept of sanitization, or even basic cleanliness, was utterly alien. Tables were rarely cleaned with anything more thorough than a damp, probably filthy rag that simply moved the microbes around, rather than removing them. This rag, if it existed at all, was likely used for everything from wiping spilled ale to cleaning up human effluvia, ensuring a rich and diverse bacterial transfer to every surface it touched. The act of cleaning was merely an illusion, a performative gesture that actually served to spread the grime, the stickiness, and the various pathogens more evenly across the table. So, every meal, every drink is enjoyed on a surface that has been lovingly prepared with a fresh layer of ancient filth. You're not just eating at a table, you're eating off a communal bacterial playground. These tables also bear the marks of their tumultuous history. Expect carvings and damage, crude graffiti etched into the wood by bored or frustrated patrons, deep knife scars from arguments escalating into brawls, evidence of long-forgotten fights, and messages of despair or defiance. Each table tells a story, and it's almost certainly not a good one. You might see a crude drawing of a knight, or a heart pierced by an arrow, or perhaps something less romantic and more explicitly vulgar. These aren't decorative elements. They're battle scars, testaments to the raw, often violent human drama that unfolded within these walls. The wood is splintered, gouged, and stained, bearing the indelible marks of centuries of human interaction, much of it aggressive. It's a testament to the fact that these tables weren't just for dining. They were stages for gambling, negotiations, arguments, and sometimes impromptu surgery. And if you're lucky enough to be offered a spoon, a rare luxury for many common folk, expect it to have been pre-loved by many, many others, and not sanitized, ever. The concept of individual, clean utensils was practically unheard of for the general populace. You might eat with your hands, or if a utensil is available, it's a communal tool, passed around, rinsed, if at all, in a bucket of questionable water, and then offered to the next patron. This shared economy of germ transmission ensures that every bite carries with it the delightful potential for sharing whatever delightful pathogens the previous diners had to offer. Your modern mind, screaming about cross-contamination and bacterial load, will be in a state of constant, low-level panic. But here, it's just how things are. Eat up, dear traveler, and enjoy your meal, seasoned liberally with the DNA of a dozen strangers and the silent promise of impending gastrointestinal distress. At the very heart of the medieval tavern, often taken center stage in the common room, is the hearth. A roaring fire, a deceptively inviting central feature that promises warmth, comfort, and a focal point for communal gathering. In the cold, damp medieval climate, a strong fire was not just a luxury, it was a necessity for survival, a beacon of heat in a world largely devoid of central heating. It seems like the one genuinely pleasant aspect of the entire experience, doesn't it? A place to thaw your frozen extremities, to dry your perpetually damp clothes, to simply bask in the gentle glow. It's the visual anchor of that romanticized fantasy, the element that screams cozy more than anything else. You might even feel a flicker of genuine comfort as you approach its inviting, dancing flames. But alas, dear friend, your modern lungs will quickly disabuse you of any notions of coziness. Smoke management was, to put it mildly, non-existent. Chimneys, if they existed at all, were rudimentary, poorly designed, and often woefully inefficient. The result? Smoke often filled the room, billowing freely before slowly, grudgingly finding its way out through an opening in the roof or simply dissipating into the rafters. So, that roaring fire isn't just providing warmth, it's also providing a generous dose of carbon monoxide, creosote, and particulate matter directly into your respiratory system. Enjoy your chronic bronchitis, your persistent cough, and the feeling that your lungs are slowly being lined with a fine layer of medieval soot. Your eyes will sting, your throat will scratch, and you'll realize that warmth often came with a side effect of suffocation light. This isn't a crackling clean burn, it's a perpetually smoky bonfire in your living room. And the heat factor? It's a double-edged sword, wielded with medieval indifference. In winter, the heat is often overbearing, a suffocating blast that quickly turns your damp clothes into steaming, smelly instruments of self-torture. You're either shivering outside or slowly cooking inside, unable to find that elusive sweet spot of comfortable warmth. In summer, it's an absolute nightmare. The fire, kept roaring for cooking and light, turns the already stuffy, crowded tavern into an unbearable oven, ensuring that everyone is perpetually drenched in sweat, adding another layer to the already potent body odor symphony. You're either sweating profusely, trying to escape the oppressive warmth, or shivering violently, trying to cling to its precious heat. It's a constant battle with temperature extremes, with no thermostat to gently adjust the dial to a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit. You are a passive participant in a historical sauna, often with clothes that aren't designed for breathability. And finally, the hearth, for all its life-giving warmth, is also a perpetual danger zone. Hot embers constantly spit and crackle, threatening to ignite a stray piece of straw or a particularly dry tunic. Sparks fly, landing on unsuspecting patrons, leaving small, irritating burns. And let's not forget the multitude of drunkards who stumble too close to the flame, their coordination impaired, their judgment non-existent. It's an accident waiting to happen repeatedly. A stray kick, a falling body, a dropped tankard, any of these could send glowing embers flying, potentially setting fire to straw on the floor, a nearby curtain, or even another patron. It's not just a source of warmth, it's a source of constant, low-level anxiety, a reminder that death by immolation is always a distinct possibility in the medieval world. So stand too close and risk a burn, stand too far and risk freezing. Such is the delightful conundrum of the medieval hearth. If you're particularly well-heeled, or perhaps just particularly desperate for a modicum of privacy, you might inquire about the upper floors or a private room. Upstairs accommodation in a medieval tavern usually meant dorm-style sleeping. Imagine a large room, sparsely furnished with straw-filled mattresses or pallets laid directly on the floor. You'll be sharing this communal sleeping space with a dozen, sometimes 24 other travelers, merchants, pilgrims, itinerant rickers, and anyone else who can afford the meager fee. Still awful, certainly, but at least slightly less public than simply passing out under a table in the common room. The straw bedding will be old, dusty, and absolutely crawling with fleas, lice, and various other unseen arthropods. It's less a bed and more a teeming ecosystem, where you are merely a warm, soft host. You'll itch. Oh, how you'll itch. And as for private rooms, don't get your hopes up. These were more like partitioned cubicles, often created with thin, flimsy wooden walls or even just heavy curtains. Privacy was a foreign, capitalist concept, an indulgence reserved for the truly wealthy, and even then, it was a relative term. These weren't soundproofed sanctuaries. You might get a door, perhaps even a lock, which you'd be wise to use, however flimsy, but the walls would be thin enough to transmit every cough, every snore, every argument, and every intimate activity from your neighbors. You're paying for the illusion of solitude, not the reality. It's less a private room and more a designated area where you can experience the intimate lives of your fellow patrons in high-fidelity audio, just without direct eye contact. Of course, this meager attempt at luxury comes at an added cost. You pay more for this slight bit of separation, not necessarily for cleanliness, quiet, or a reduction in bed bugs. In fact, due to the communal nature of the establishment and the transient population, these upper rooms were often more prone to infestations of fleas and lice than the common room. You're essentially paying a premium for the privilege of a slightly elevated, slightly less public form of suffering. The mattress might be slightly thicker, the blanket slightly less threadbare, but the underlying reality of medieval squalor remains stubbornly present. Your private room is still a breeding ground for microorganisms, a vector for disease, and a silent testament to the medieval world's profound indifference to your personal comfort. And that sound transmission we mentioned? It's not just a minor inconvenience, it's a full-blown auditory immersion. Every cough, every snore, every whispered argument, every clandestine activity will be perfectly audible through the flimsy walls. You'll be privy to the nocturnal habits of your neighbors, whether you want to be or not. A merchant's drunken ramblings, a pilgrim's fervent prayers, a couple's, shall we say, enthusiastic expressions of affection, all of it will filter through, ensuring that your sleep, if it comes at all, will be deeply fractured and vividly memorable. Enjoy your neighbors' intimate lives. You're paying for the front row seat to their most private moments. You'll lie there, listening, itching, and silently cursing the inventor of thin walls, all while trying to convince yourself that this is somehow better than sleeping in a ditch. It's a subtle form of auditory torture, a reminder that true solitude is a concept still centuries away. Now that you're immersed in the delightful ambiance, let's meet the ringleader, the puppet master, the one person who truly holds sway within these walls, the tavern keeper. Often a gruff, cynical character, weathered by years of dealing with drunken louts, desperate travelers, and the constant threat of riot and disease. They have seen it all, heard it all, and probably smelt it all 1,000 times over. They trust no one, their eyes constantly scanning the room for trouble, and they possess the patience of a medieval executioner, which is to say, very little. They are the immovable object in a world of chaotic forces, the steadfast, if begrudging, anchor of the tavern's operations. Their face is a roadmap of past grievances and current exasperation, often adorned with a permanent scowl that could curdle milk. Don't expect a warm welcome. Expect a curt nod, or perhaps a suspicious grunt as they tally up your potential threat level. This individual is not merely a bartender, they are a multitasker extraordinaire, the medieval equivalent of a one-person startup with entirely too many hats. They are the bartender, pouring the questionable ale and wine. They are the cook, stirring the mystery stew. They are the bouncer, ready to throw out any unruly patron, often with a surprising amount of brute force. They are the landlord, managing the meager accommodations upstairs. And yes, in some establishments, they might even be a de facto pimp, facilitating other forms of entertainment. More often than not, they are also the de facto legal authority within the tavern's walls, dispensing their own brand of rough justice, often with a heavy hand and a distinct lack of due process. Their word is law here, their judgment swift and often final. They are the linchpin, the central figure around whom the entire ecosystem of the tavern revolves, and their absence would plunge the establishment into immediate anarchy. They juggle more responsibilities than a modern CEO, all while dealing with significantly lower sanitation standards and much higher rates of actual physical violence. Their primary motivation, above all else, is profit. Your comfort is secondary, tertiary, or probably not even on the list. Expect short measures in your drinks, ensuring they maximize their meager profits. Expect inflated prices, especially if you look like a naive traveler with a few coins to spare. And expect a distinct lack of anything resembling modern customer service. There are no "customer is always right" mantras here. The customer is usually an annoyance, a potential problem, or simply a source of income to be squeezed dry. Complaining about the quality of the ale or the presence of a rodent in your stew is likely to be met with a contemptuous glare, a sarcastic retort, or perhaps even a forceful escort out the door. Your satisfaction is irrelevant. Your money is not. They are a capitalist in a rudimentary market, driven by the harsh realities of medieval economics, where every penny counts and every patron is a potential resource. Their smile, if you ever see one, is likely a sign of impending trouble, or perhaps just gas. And make no mistake, the tavern keeper knows the ropes. They know everyone, and they know everything that happens within their domain. They've heard all the stories, seen all the cons, and witnessed every variety of human depravity. They are the ultimate information broker, the silent observer whose ears and eyes miss nothing. Don't try to cross them, don't try to cheat them, and definitely don't try to insult them, unless you fancy finding yourself in the dung heap outside, possibly with a few less teeth, and certainly with no chance of ever securing a drink or a bed again. Their memory for slights is long, and their retribution often swift and satisfyingly medieval. They are the unwavering presence in a world of transient chaos, the constant reminder that for all the apparent freedom, there are always rules, and there is always someone in charge. And that someone is probably a gruff, cynical individual who holds your life, or at least your evening's comfort, firmly in their calloused hands. As you settle into your questionable seating, you'll inevitably encounter the serving wenches. These were often young women, working long, grueling hours for meager pay, serving as the front line of tavern operations. Their lives were incredibly hard, marked by relentless labor, and they were often among the most vulnerable members of medieval society. They moved through the crowded, smoky room with a practiced efficiency, balancing heavy tankards, dodging drunken patrons, and enduring a constant barrage of noise and discomfort. Their faces often betrayed a weariness beyond their years, a quiet resignation to a fate that offered few avenues for escape or advancement. They embodied the harsh realities of medieval female labor, a testament to the sheer physical and emotional endurance required to simply exist in such a demanding environment. But their duties extended far beyond merely delivering beverages. The grim reality of the medieval tavern often meant that these women were expected to provide other forms of entertainment. This is where the dark implications and grim realities of their existence become painfully clear. They were objects of desire, subjected to constant harassment, unwanted advances, and often outright exploitation. While some might have been outright prostitutes, many others were simply expected to tolerate the lewd comments, the groping hands, and the constant pressure to provide sexual favors simply as an extension of their job. Their bodies, their smiles, their very presence were considered part of the tavern's offerings, often with little to no agency or protection for themselves. It's a stark reminder of the brutal power dynamics of the age, where the vulnerable had precious few rights. Indeed, the constant threat of harassment, verbal abuse, physical violence, and general disrespect was a daily occurrence. There was little to no recourse for these women. Complaining to the tavern keeper might result in punishment for provoking a customer or simply being ignored. The local authorities were unlikely to care about the plight of a serving wench, seeing them as little more than chattel. They learned to navigate this treacherous social landscape with a delicate balance of wit, deference, and strategic avoidance, often developing a thick skin and a sharp tongue as defense mechanisms. Every shift was a performance, a careful dance between attracting customers and fending off unwanted advances, a constant negotiation of personal safety in a deeply unsafe environment. Their existence was a testament to survival, resilience, and the relentless pressure of a deeply unequal society. Yet, despite their precarious social standing on the fringes of society, these serving wenches were often surprisingly shrewd, observant, and incredibly resilient. They saw everything. They heard all the gossip, witnessed all the clandestine dealings, and understood the true characters of the patrons in a way that few others did. They knew who was honest, who was a cheat, who was dangerous, and who was merely a loudmouth drunk. They were unofficial intelligence gatherers, their minds processing the subtle cues and unspoken truths of the tavern's ecosystem. Their resilience was not just physical, but mental, allowing them to endure the constant degradation while still maintaining a keen understanding of their environment. They were survivors, making the best of an undeniably terrible situation, and often possessing an inner strength that belied their outward vulnerability. So while they might appear to be mere background figures, they were, in fact, incredibly astute observers, their quiet presence masking a wealth of knowledge and a deep understanding of the human condition in its most raw and unvarnished form. Among the tapestry of medieval life, you'll quickly identify a distinct, highly visible subgroup, the local drunks. These are the regulars, the permanent fixtures, whose lives often revolve around the tavern, a blurred existence between the establishment's four walls and the inevitable gutter outside. They are the walking, staggering cautionary tales, living advertisements for the perils of excessive, unregulated alcohol consumption in an age with no concept of responsible drinking. Their faces are often red and bloated, their eyes blazed over with a perpetual stupor, their clothes stained with various spills, and the unmistakable marks of a life lived in constant disarray. They are the silent, or rather very loud, prophecies of what a prolonged stay in such an environment can do to a person. A grim vision of your own potential future if you're not careful. Their condition is one of perpetual inebriation. They are loud, obnoxious, belligerent, and utterly insensible to the needs or desires of anyone around them. Their conversations veer wildly from maudlin self-pity to aggressive boasting, often without any coherent gridge in between. They sway on their feet, slur their words, and occasionally collapse into an insensible heap, only to miraculously reanimate minutes later with renewed vigor for drinking. They are a force of nature, usually a destructive one, stumbling through the crowded room, bumping into people, and initiating arguments with the sheer force of their incoherent logic. Their voices, often hoarse from overuse, contribute significantly to the tavern's cacophony, bellowing out fragments of songs or nonsensical pronouncements. They are less individuals and more a collective, staggering entity, a constant source of unpredictable chaos. And prepare yourself for their stories. They are likely to corner you, the fresh, unfamiliar face, with rambling tales of woe, local conspiracies that make absolutely no sense, or outright madness. They'll grab your arm with a surprisingly strong grip, their breath a potent mix of stale ale and decaying teeth, and launch into an endless monologue about the injustice of the world, the treachery of their neighbors, or the exact dimensions of the turnip they grew last summer. You'll try to nod politely, to extract yourself gracefully, but their grip is firm, and their need for an audience is insatiable. Their narratives are often disjointed, repetitive, and utterly devoid of punctuation, a stream of consciousness that seems to loop back on itself with alarming regularity. These are the oral historians of the gutter, their memories as unreliable as the tavern's ale, their insights as profound as a puddle of horse urine. But beyond the mere annoyance, the local drunks pose a very real physical threat. They are unpredictable and prone to sudden, unprovoked violence, often fueled by their profound intoxication and underlying resentments. A misinterpreted glance, a bumped elbow, or simply a perceived slight can trigger an explosive outburst. Their punches are clumsy but surprisingly powerful, and they often wield whatever is at hand, a heavy mug, a stool, even a piece of stale bread as a weapon. Your best strategy is to give them a wide berth, avoid eye contact, and politely but firmly extricate yourself from any conversation they attempt to initiate. Engaging with them is like playing Russian roulette with a historically accurate, lead-weighted pistol. You might get lucky, or you might find yourself on the receiving end of a very unpleasant, unprovoked assault. They are a living, breathing testament to the dangers of the medieval drinking culture, a warning sign writ large in slurred speech and staggering gait. Beyond the permanent fixtures and the staff, the tavern also serves as a transient crossroads, bringing together a diverse cross-section of medieval society. You'll encounter merchants, their faces etched with the strains of travel and shrewd calculation. They'll be haggling over deals, bragging about their wares, whether it's fine cloth from Flanders, spices from the East, or simply a particularly good batch of local wool. They often carry a pouch of coins, visible or otherwise, which, as you might imagine, makes them a prime target for the cut purses and thieves who also frequent the establishment. More on them later. They are the engines of medieval commerce, always seeking profit, always looking for an advantage. They might be scribbling figures on a small slate, counting coins, or boasting loudly about a recent successful trade. Their conversations are often filled with numbers, routes, and the constant assessment of risk and reward. Then there are the pilgrims. These individuals are on a holy quest, perhaps to a distant shrine or a revered relic, but even the most devout soul needs earthly sustenance. They are often weary from their long journeys, their clothes dusty and travel-stained, their faces marked by a combination of piety and profound exhaustion. They might be a bit self-righteous, carrying a visible symbol of their faith, such as a staff or a scallop shell badge. They might sing hymns under their breath, or recount tales of the miracles they hope to witness. While generally less overtly dangerous than some of the tavern's other patrons, their piety doesn't necessarily translate to pleasantness. They can be just as prone to complaining or self-important pontificating as anyone else. Their presence is a reminder of the powerful religious currents that ran through medieval life, even within the confines of a decidedly unholy establishment. And, of course, the ever-present peasantry, the backbone of medieval society, the silent, suffering majority seeking a brief respite from their hard labor in the fields or workshops. They're here to share gossip, to play a game of dice, often with meager stakes, and to simply drown their sorrows in cheap ale. Their clothes are rough, their hands calloused, their faces often prematurely aged by toil. They represent the vast majority of the tavern's clientele, their presence a grounding force in the sometimes exaggerated world of merchants and pilgrims. They are the salt of the earth, often stoic, sometimes sullen, always resilient. They might be discussing crop yields, the local lord's latest decree, or the price of grain. Their lives are simple, brutal, and often revolve around the rhythms of the land and the whims of their feudal masters. Even within the apparent chaos of the tavern, unspoken rules of status and seating subtly apply. A wealthy merchant might command a small table for himself and his associates, while pilgrims might cluster together, and peasants would occupy the communal benches by the hearth or near the door. There's an invisible hierarchy, a subtle pecking order that dictates who sits where, who gets served first, and who is listened to, or ignored. Know your place, dear traveler, or be put in it. A misstep in social etiquette could lead to a curt dismissal, a smear, or even a more aggressive confrontation. Observing these unspoken rules is a key aspect of surviving the night. You, a stranger from the future, will likely be oblivious to these nuances, making you an easy target for inadvertently offending someone of higher or lower, but more belligerent status. It's a social minefield, and you're walking through it blindfolded. As if the sheer squalor and general unpleasantness weren't enough, the medieval tavern is also a magnet for the less savory elements of society. This is the true underbelly, the shadowy figures who lurk in the dim corners, their intentions as murky as the ale they drink. First up, the pickpockets and cut-purses, masters of their craft, blending seamlessly into the crowded room, their hands moving with lightning speed and practiced stealth. Your purse is their target, your meager coins their prize, and they are highly skilled artists of larceny. A jostle, a distraction, a casual brush, and your money pouch, which you foolishly thought was secure, is suddenly lighter. They often work in teams, one creating a diversion, the other executing the snatch, leaving you bewildered and poorer. And there's no CCTV, no lost and found, no sympathetic ear to listen to your plight. Once your money is gone, it's gone, swallowed by the efficient machinations of the medieval criminal underworld. Then we have the gamblers and cheaters. Dice games were a popular pastime, and tables were often rigged, the dice weighted, and the players masters of sleight of hand. They will lure you in with friendly smiles and promises of easy winnings, only to systematically relieve you of everything you possess. These aren't friendly, casual games. They are carefully orchestrated cons designed to extract maximum profit from unsuspecting marks. They'll take everything you have, including your dignity, leaving you with empty pockets and the bitter taste of regret. They know every trick, every hustle, every way to manipulate the odds in their favor. And if you dare to accuse them of cheating, you risk not just an argument, but a full-blown brawl. The tavern also serves as a convenient hiding place for outlaws and deserters, men, and occasionally women, hiding in plain sight from the law. They're looking for trouble, a quick score, or an even quicker escape from the authorities who might be pursuing them. They are desperate and dangerous, having little to lose, and are often quick to resort to violence if they feel threatened or cornered. You might inadvertently find yourself sitting next to a wanted criminal, a man with a price on his head, who views your presence with a mixture of suspicion and potential opportunity. Their eyes dart around, constantly assessing the room, always ready to spring into action or vanish into the shadows. Their very presence adds an underlying layer of tension and threat to the already volatile atmosphere. And completing this delightful tableau are the pimps and prostitutes, often an integrated, though sometimes overlooked, part of the tavern economy and social scene. Prostitution was a grim reality of medieval life, often tolerated and sometimes even regulated in urban areas. The tavern provided a convenient location for these transactions, a place where men could seek female companionship, often from the very serving wenches who worked there, or from dedicated courtesans who operated within the establishment. The pimps acted as intermediaries, ensuring their girls were safe, or at least protected from unpaid violence, and collecting their cut. Their presence is a reminder of the raw, unvarnished aspects of human desire and economic necessity, an integral part of the tavern's complex social fabric, contributing to its reputation as a place of both pleasure and moral decay. You're not just observing, you're immersed in the raw, uncensored reality of medieval urban life, where every human interaction, no matter how sordid, has its place. All right, enough with the scenery and the sketchy characters. You're thirsty. And in the medieval world, this is where things get truly interesting. Forget your bottled water, your sparkling San Pellegrino, or even your humble tap water. In the medieval era, water was often contaminated, riddled with bacteria, parasites, and whatever agricultural runoff decided to flow into the local well. Drinking it straight was a gamble with your very life. So the safer option, the daily drink for everyone, including children, was low-alcohol brews like ale and beer. Safer being a very relative term, of course. The fermentation process killed some pathogens, yes, but it didn't magically purify it into a pristine elixir. It merely reduced the immediate lethality. This was the universal beverage, consumed at all meals, by all ages, a constant liquid companion in a world where thirst was a genuine threat. But let's talk about quality control. Non-existent. Absolutely gloriously absent. Expect wild variations in strength, taste, and questionable ingredients. One brew might be thick and nourishing, almost like a thin gruel, while the next could be a watery, bitter mess. Sometimes it tasted vaguely of fruit, sometimes of dirt, and sometimes of something you genuinely couldn't identify without a forensics lab. The ingredients weren't always pure either. Cheap fillers, dubious additives, and often whatever grains were cheapest and most readily available were thrown into the mash. Sometimes it was even deliberately watered down after brewing to stretch the supply, further diluting any nutritional benefits and making the whole enterprise a bit of a scam. You never quite knew what you were getting, and every sip was an act of faith or desperation. And the headaches? Oh, they're guaranteed. From bad fermentation practices that produced nasty byproducts to questionable additives designed to enhance flavor or stretch the brew, you'll feel it in the morning, and probably throughout the night. It's not just a typical hangover. It's a profound, skull-crushing ache that makes you question every decision you've ever made, particularly the one that led you to believe medieval ale was a good idea. The headache is often accompanied by a profound sense of nausea, a dry mouth that feels like sandpaper, and a general malaise that suggests your body is actively rebelling against the foreign substances you've just ingested. This isn't just about getting drunk. It's about entering a world of self-inflicted chemical warfare, where the only prize is temporary oblivion and long-term suffering. And then there's the volume. Because these brews had a low alcohol content, often around 2 to 3%, you had to drink a lot to get properly drunk. We're talking multiple pints, flagons, and tankards. This led to massive fluid intake, which inevitably led to massive bathroom issues. Your bladder, accustomed to holding a comfortable amount of liquid, will be screaming for relief with alarming regularity. And given the latrine situation, which we'll get to, don't you worry, this presents a whole new set of problems. You're constantly cycling between thirst, intoxication, and the desperate need to relieve yourself, all within a highly unsanitary and socially challenging environment. It's a physiological treadmill of discomfort, a constant reminder that medieval hydration was a full-body experience, often ending in public urination or a very quick trip to the unspeakable outhouse. If ale was the drink of the common folk, wine was for the discerning, or at least the aspiringly sophisticated palate. It was more expensive, often imported from other regions or even across the channel, and therefore a clear sign of higher social standing. Ordering wine wasn't just about enjoying a different beverage, it was a performance, a subtle or not so subtle declaration of your wealth and status. You're basically flashing your cash, signaling to everyone in the tavern that you're a cut above the ale-swilling masses. This makes you both a target for admiration from the very naive and a prime mark for the ever-present thieves and con artists. It's an act of conspicuous consumption, a liquid status symbol in a world obsessed with hierarchical distinctions. But don't let the price tag or the perceived sophistication fool you. quality and adulteration were still highly variable, bordering on abysmal. Medieval wine was often watered down to stretch profits, improved with questionable additives. Lead, anyone? Perhaps some chalk or berries for color, or simply vinegary due to poor storage and handling. The idea of a consistent, high-quality vintage was practically a fantasy. You might get a surprisingly palatable, for the era, drink, or you might get something that tastes like sour grapes mixed with bilge water. The range of potential flavors, from vaguely fruity to outright putrid, was vast and entirely unpredictable. It was a risky business, and even the most expensive bottle carried the distinct possibility of being a profoundly unpleasant experience, chemically enhanced for maximum profit. Storage and spoilage were constant battles. Without modern refrigeration, wine was notoriously difficult to keep fresh. It was poorly stored, often in permeable containers, susceptible to spoilage from heat, air exposure, and bacterial growth. Sometimes, what was sold as wine was merely a fermented concoction of whatever fruit was available: apples, pears, berries, leading to a bewildering array of wines that bore little resemblance to the grape-based beverage you might expect. The journey from vineyard to tavern was fraught with peril for the liquid, ensuring that by the time it reached your lips, it was often past its prime, if it ever had one to begin with. You're not getting a fine aged Merlot, you're getting a gamble, a fermented mystery that might taste more like vinegar than anything else. And the hangover? Oh, dear God, the hangover of the ages. If you think modern wine hangovers are bad, wait until you try medieval wine. The combination of unpredictable alcohol content, questionable additives, did we mention the lead? And the sheer volume you might consume to feel a buzz will produce a skull-splitting, gut-wrenching, soul-crushing hangover that will make you wish for the sweet release of death. You'll wake up, if you manage to sleep at all, feeling like a medieval blacksmith has taken a hammer to your skull, your stomach doing its best impression of a washing machine on spin cycle, and a profound sense of regret that will linger for days. It's a full-body assault, a punishment for your hubris in thinking you could outdrink the medieval world. Modern medicine can offer relief. Medieval medicine would offer leeches, which, let's be honest, would only make things worse. Eventually, the drinking must lead to eating, if only to line your stomach against the torrent of questionable liquid. But don't expect a diverse, appealing menu. What's on offer in a medieval tavern is typically simple, repetitive fare, driven by necessity and availability. You'll find variations of bread, often stale and hard, perhaps a hunk of cheese, usually hard, pungent, and quite possibly made from questionable milk, and the omnipresent pottage. Pottage is a thick, often bland stew, a catch-all dish made from whatever grains, vegetables, if any were in season, and scraps of meat, if you were lucky, were available. It was designed to be filling, nutritious, and incredibly forgiving of a lack of culinary skill. No Michelin stars here, my friend. Not even a single Yelp review that wasn't written by someone with dysentery. It's sustenance, pure and simple, devoid of flair or finesse. The menu is strictly seasonal and local, which in the medieval era was not a trendy farm-to-table movement. It was a mandatory economic reality. There was no global supply chain, no refrigerated trucks bringing exotic produce from distant lands. You ate what was available, when it was available, and from wherever it could be locally sourced. In winter, that meant root vegetables, dried meat, and stored grains. In summer, you might get some fresh greens, but perishables spoiled quickly. This dictated a rigid, unvaried diet, where one season's bounty was quickly followed by another season's scarcity. Variety was a luxury. Your palate, accustomed to the global smorgasbord of modern cuisine, will be in for a profound shock. You'll pine for a simple orange, a fresh green salad, or anything that hasn't been boiled into oblivion or salted beyond recognition. And presentation? Utterly lacking. Food is often slapped unceremoniously on a trencher, a thick slice of stale bread that served as your plate, designed to soak up the juices and be eaten or discarded afterward. Or, if you're feeling fancy, a shared wooden platter, often scarred and grimy from countless previous meals. There are no garnishes, no artistic arrangements, no attempt whatsoever to make the food look appealing. A pig could present food better, probably with more care and less filth. The goal is to get the food from the kitchen to your stomach as quickly and efficiently as possible, with minimal fuss or aesthetic consideration. It's a pragmatic approach to eating, where hunger is the best sauce, and visual appeal is an entirely irrelevant concept. Your modern sensibilities will recoil at the sheer inelegance, the utter disregard for even basic plating. But here's the fun part. The mystery meat. Don't ask what's in the stew. Really, don't. Ignorance is bliss until, of course, you get dysentery. The stew could contain anything from actual beef or mutton scraps, to older, tougher cuts of various animals, to roadkill, to rats that have been processed in the back. The flavors are often heavily disguised by copious amounts of herbs and spices, if available, to mask the taste of decomposition or unfamiliar ingredients. The broth is thick, often murky, and the chunks of meat are usually unidentifiable in texture and origin. Every bite is an act of blind faith, a culinary gamble where the stakes are your intestinal fortitude. You're not just eating a meal, you're engaging in a biological experiment, hoping that your immune system is up to the task of processing whatever dubious protein source has found its way into your bowl. When it comes to food safety, the Medieval Tavern exists in a parallel universe where the concept simply hasn't been invented yet. Forget your food hygiene ratings, your temperature controls, your expiration dates. That's all centuries away. First and foremost, the lack of refrigeration. Food spoilage was rampant, a constant, pervasive threat. Meat was salted, smoked, dried, or eaten quickly before it developed sentience. Fish was often cured or consumed immediately after being caught. Vegetables wilted, milk soured, and bread quickly went stale or moldy. Every single ingredient was on a countdown timer to putrefaction, and the tavern staff's primary job was often to win this race against decay, or failing that, to disguise the signs of its inevitable loss. You're essentially eating food that has been preserved by ancient, often crude methods, or that is simply on the very edge of edible. And cleanliness? Utterly, gloriously absent. Unwashed hands, unsanitized surfaces, pests crawling freely over everything. This is the default state of a medieval kitchen and serving area. The cook probably hasn't washed their hands since last week, if ever. The cutting boards are stained with centuries of meat juices and grime. Flies buzz around, landing on everything, sampling your meal before you do. Rats scurry across the floor, perhaps even daring to venture onto the countertops. It's a buffet for bacteria, a thriving ecosystem of microorganisms, all vying for dominance on every surface, in every morsel of food. Your modern kitchen, with its antibacterial wipes and constant sanitization, would be considered a sterile laboratory by medieval standards. Here, it's a biological free-for-all, where every preparation step adds a new layer of potential pathogens. Cross-contamination wasn't just a risk. It was a fundamental principle of medieval food preparation. Everything touched everything else. Raw meat next to cooked vegetables, next to the tavern cat, next to the unwashed hands of the cook, next to the pestilent table. The same knife might be used to chop raw meat, then vegetables, then clean fingernails, all without so much as a wipe. The same serving spoon might be used for multiple dishes, spreading flavors and bacteria indiscriminately. The 5-second rule in this environment? Try the 5-day rule, or even the 5-week rule. Anything dropped on the floor, particularly if it was a substantial piece of food, was likely picked up, dusted off, if you were lucky, and returned to the pot or plate. Waste not, want not, right? Even if waste not meant ingest pathogens. The consequence of this profound disregard for food safety, foodborne illness was a constant companion, an almost inevitable side effect of eating out in a medieval tavern. Dysentery, parasites, salmonella, E. coli, and a host of worse, often unnamed, gastrointestinal horrors were common side effects. You might survive a brawl, you might avoid the plague, but a good meal was often a fast track to debilitating stomach cramps, fever, vomiting, and diarrhea. The symptoms were often dismissed as bad humors or a touch of the ague, when in reality, it was just your body valiantly, and often unsuccessfully, battling a bacterial invasion from that delicious mystery meat stew. Every bite is a roll of the dice, a culinary adventure with genuinely lethal stakes. If the food wasn't enough to make your immune system throw in the towel, let's turn our attention back to the drinks, because every sip is a calculated risk. The communal drinking vessel, a staple of medieval tavern life, was a superhighway for germs, a direct conduit for disease transmission. Mugs and cups were passed from mouth to mouth, from patron to patron, from disease to disease. Imagine a dozen people, some coughing, some sniffling, some perhaps unknowingly carrying a virulent pathogen, all sharing the same unwashed tankard. It's a germ exchange program, a biological handshake that bypasses all common sense hygiene. Your lips are now pressing against the residue of countless other mouths, sharing not just a drink, but a rich, diverse cocktail of medieval microbes. It's less a vessel for hydration and more a designated disease vector. And that safer water used for brewing, cooking, and occasional cleaning, it was often a significant source of the very diseases the ale was supposed to prevent. While the boiling process for brewing might kill some pathogens, it didn't eliminate all of them, especially if the water itself was heavily contaminated to begin with. The water used for washing, which, again, was rare and often ineffective, was often drawn from the same dubious sources, meaning that any attempt at cleanliness was fundamentally flawed. It's a circular logic of contamination. The clean ale is brewed with dirty water, and the clean dishes are washed in dirty water, ensuring that the cycle of disease transmission continues unbroken. You're not just drinking a beverage, you're ingesting a liquid history of local microbial life, a biological census of the local pathogens. Spills and splashes are not just minor inconveniences, they are further opportunities for contagion. The floor of the tavern is not merely dirty, it's a biohazard zone, a slick, grimy surface coated with layers of spilled ale, vomit, food scraps, and various unidentifiable bodily fluids. Anything that drops onto this delightful mosaic of filth is probably just picked up and reused. The 5-second rule? That's a modern aspirational concept. Here, it's more like the 5-day rule, or the if it's still vaguely recognizable, it's good to go rule. A dropped piece of bread, a fallen utensil, even a mug that slips from a drunken hand, all are fair game for reuse, carrying with them a fresh coating of whatever delightful pathogens are currently thriving on the floor. It's a testament to the sheer resilience of medieval immune systems, or perhaps just their statistical inevitability of getting sick anyway. And this, my friends, is the great leveler. Disease didn't care about your social status. Everyone was equally susceptible. Whether you were a wealthy merchant, a pious pilgrim, or a humble peasant, the communal mug, the contaminated water, and the unsanitary conditions ensured that you were all on equal footing when it came to contracting cholera, typhoid, dysentery, or a host of other debilitating and often fatal illnesses. Your money couldn't buy you immunity, only perhaps a slightly cleaner shared bed to die in. Enjoy your new friends, cholera and typhoid. They don't discriminate. They're inclusive, democratic, and absolutely relentless. Every sip, every bite, every breath in this tavern is an invitation to a biological lottery where the prize is usually a prolonged, agonizing illness. So drink up, dear traveler. You're not just having a pint. You're playing Russian roulette with your gut biome. Having survived the gastronomic horrors, you might seek some diversion from the overwhelming stench and noise. And in a medieval tavern, that usually means games of chance. Hitting the bones, as dice games were known, was a hugely popular pastime, drawing in patrons of all stripes. But here's the crucial caveat. Loaded dice were more common than honest ones. Trust no one, especially not the smiling stranger with a surprisingly lucky streak. The dice might be weighted, shaved, or simply manipulated by skilled hands. The cups might be designed to allow for sleight of hand. Every throw is a gamble, not just against luck, but against a system deliberately rigged against you. You're entering a shark tank, and you're probably swimming in a fancy, easily taken modern swimsuit. Beyond dice, there were board games, rudimentary versions of chess, backgammon, known as tables, or Nine Men's Morris. These were intellectual challenges, yes, but often played with high stakes and even higher tempers. A wrong move, a perceived slight, or a particularly aggravating loss could quickly escalate from a strategic dispute to a full-blown verbal or even physical altercation. The quiet concentration you might associate with such games in a modern context is entirely absent here. Instead, you'll find an atmosphere charged with tension, where every move is scrutinized and every win is a cause for boisterous celebration or simmering resentment. And the stakes were real. Often money, of course, a few precious coins that represented a day's wages or more. But it could also be possessions, your cloak, your boots, your meager sword, or even the food you've just acquired. In extreme cases, it could even involve services or the promise of future labor, turning a game into an impromptu form of indenture. Be prepared to lose your cloak or your boots, leaving you vulnerable to the elements and the scorn of your fellow patrons. The medieval gambler plays for keeps, and losing means tangible, immediate consequences that impact your very survival. This isn't just about fun, it's about risk, reward, and the very real possibility of losing everything you possess in a moment of ill-advised wagering. The inevitable consequence of rigged games, high stakes, and copious alcohol consumption is conflict. Cheating was rampant, and accusations, shouting matches, and full-blown brawls were a regular feature of tavern gambling. It's not if it happens, but when. A patron might slam a fist on the table, accusing his opponent of sleight of hand. Voices will rise, threats will be exchanged, and the game will quickly devolve into a chaotic scene of flying fists and overturned tables. You, the unsuspecting modern observer, might inadvertently get caught in the crossfire, or, worse, be mistaken for one of the combatants. It's a guaranteed source of entertainment, certainly, but only if you enjoy watching humanity devolve into its most primal, aggressive form. Your idea of a quiet evening playing board games is about to be violently shattered. Amidst the general chaos, you might occasionally encounter the tavern's answer to live entertainment, minstrels and bards. These were wandering musicians, storytellers, and performers who might grace the tavern with their talents. Emphasis, and I really can't stress this enough, on might. They might be genuinely talented, capable of weaving captivating tales or playing a lute with some skill. Or they might be utterly tone-deaf, irritating, and accompanied by questionable hygiene that rivals even the tavern's own. You never knew what you were going to get, and the gamble rarely paid off. Sometimes it was a genuine treat. More often, it was an endurance test. The quality control, as with most things medieval, was highly variable. One night, you might hear a surprisingly skilled rendition of an epic poem, complete with dramatic pauses and expressive gestures. The next, you might be subjected to a drunkard attempting to play a lute with 3 strings missing, croaking out a tuneless lament about lost love and the high price of bread. Their costumes might be threadbare, their instruments battered, and their general demeanor one of desperate cheerfulness masking profound weariness. They are the traveling entertainers, constantly on the move, trying to eke out a living from the sparse generosity of tavern patrons. And yes, their hygiene levels are often on par with the establishment itself, adding their own unique aroma to the general bouquet of the tavern. Paying for the performance was usually expected. These minstrels and bards relied on the generosity of the crowd for their livelihood. You're often expected to toss coins into a cap or plate after their performance, or they might just follow you around, playing their dreadful lute or droning their endless ballad until you do. There's no fixed ticket price, no convenient Venmo. It's a direct, often guilt-tripping appeal for charity, a test of your willingness to part with your meager coins for what might be a truly terrible auditory experience. They might even single you out, the newcomer, with a particularly intense stare, implicitly demanding a donation. You're not just an audience member, you're a potential patron, and your generosity, or lack thereof, will be noted. And, of course, this entertainment simply adds to the already overwhelming din of the tavern. The minstrel's efforts, however sincere or off-key, are often drowned out by the shouting, the clanking, and the general cacophony, making it impossible to truly appreciate or suffer through their performance. It becomes another layer of noise pollution, further muddying the soundscape, making conversation impossible, and ensuring your skull feels like a bell that has been rung repeatedly by a particularly enthusiastic medieval blacksmith. So, while it's technically entertainment, it's more accurately described as additional noise, a further assault on your ears, driving you closer and closer to the sweet release of either profound intoxication or total sensory shutdown. In an age without mass media, conversation in the tavern was a potent force, the primary mode of information exchange. But this was a highly unreliable network. It's where local news, often embellished beyond recognition, wildly inaccurate accounts of distant events, and entirely fabricated stories all swirled together. A minor squabble in the village could become a full-blown blood feud in the retelling. A traveling merchant's ordinary journey could become an epic tale of monster encounters and daring escapes. It's a fascinating, if utterly untrustworthy, source of information, where facts were optional and narrative flair was king. You're not just listening to chatter, you're eavesdropping on the creation of medieval mythos, one drunken boast at a time. And speaking of eavesdropping, it's not just a pastime, it's practically a sport in the medieval tavern. Everyone is listening to everyone else. Walls have ears, and so do the patrons, particularly the suspicious ones, the gossip mongers, and those looking for an advantage. Your whispered conversation, however discreet you try to be, will likely be overheard, dissected, and reinterpreted for entertainment or leverage. You're in a public space where privacy is an illusion, and every utterance is a potential piece of information for someone else. Be wary of what you say, and to whom, because word travels fast in these close quarters, and distortions proliferate at an alarming rate. That innocuous comment about the weather could, by the time it reaches the other end of the tavern, transform into a treasonous plot against the local lord. Fueling these conversations, and often escalating them, are arguments and debates. Politics, religion, local disputes, personal insults, all of it is fair game, particularly after several pints of ale. The cramped quarters, the pervasive noise, and the general state of inebriation create a volatile environment where tempers flare easily. A simple disagreement about the price of eggs could quickly spiral into a heated, shouting match about the nature of God or the legitimacy of the king. These aren't intellectual debates. They are raw, unfiltered expressions of opinion, often backed by simmering resentment and a distinct lack of rational thought. You'll witness shouting, table pounding, and the occasional thrown object, all part of the charming conversational landscape. And this conversational landscape often skirts a very thin line, blurring the distinction between friendly banter and a serious challenge. Veiled threats are common, disguised as jokes or casual remarks, but carrying a heavy undertone of menace. You wouldn't want to find yourself alone on the road tonight, now would you, friend? A local might chuckle, his eyes cold and unwavering. Be extremely careful what you say and to whom. A casual insult, a boast taken the wrong way, or a perceived disrespect could quickly escalate into a physical confrontation. Understanding the subtle nuances of medieval social dynamics is crucial for survival, and you, with your modern directness, are utterly ill-equipped for this dance of veiled aggression. Every word is a potential weapon, and every conversation a potential minefield. All right, let's tackle a truly unavoidable biological reality, the latrine situation. You've been drinking heavily, Your bladder is screaming in protest, and you need to relieve yourself. Prepare for a true horror story, because medieval sanitation is not for the faint of heart, stomach, or nose. Usually, your only option is an outdoor privy, a primitive hole in the ground, often shared by everyone in the establishment, patrons and staff alike. It's perpetually overflowing, absolutely stinking, and often located far too close to the kitchen, allowing its delightful aroma to waft freely into the very place your food is being prepared. It's a breeding ground for flies, bacteria, and despair, an open-air monument to public health negligence. You'll step tentatively towards it, holding your breath, trying not to look, and praying for a quick, merciful release. If there's no outdoor privy, or if the weather is particularly atrocious, you might be directed to a communal bucket. This charming alternative is usually placed in a dark, foul-smelling corner of the common room, or perhaps tucked away in a tiny, unventilated closet. It's rarely emptied, often overflowing, and its contents provide a constant, pungent contribution to the tavern's signature aroma. Just try not to look. Seriously. Maintain tunnel vision, hold your breath until your lungs burn, and pray that no one else has recently added to its festering contents. The mere thought of having to use such a facility is enough to trigger a profound sense of nausea, and your modern sensibilities will recoil in utter disgust at this blatant disregard for even the most basic human dignity. And hygiene after use? Non-existent. Absolutely, gloriously, tragically absent. There's no toilet paper, no hand-washing facilities, no concept of sanitization whatsoever. You just wipe with what's available. A handful of leaves, a wad of moss, a scrap of cloth if you're lucky, or more likely, just your bare hand. Then you carry on, returning to your drink and food, your hands now covered in whatever delightful pathogens you just encountered. The idea of washing your hands with soap and water after using the latrine would be an alien concept, a bewildering ritual. This is a direct pipeline for disease, a super spreader event disguised as a bathroom break. Your modern germophobia will reach peak, screaming levels of panic, and you'll spend the rest of the night trying to avoid touching anything or anyone. The smell and flies surrounding the latrine are a constant, pervasive presence, especially in warmer months. A thick cloud of buzzing flies, drawn by the irresistible aroma of human waste, will congregate around the privy or bucket, acting as diligent vectors for every disease known to man, and probably some yet undiscovered. The stench is so potent, so overwhelming, that it permeates the very fabric of the tavern, even when you're nowhere near the source. It's a breeding ground for every imaginable pathogen, a microbial hotspot where bacteria, viruses, and parasites thrive in an unchecked, unhygienic paradise. Your modern nose will wrinkle in disgust, your stomach will churn, and you'll realize that the true horror of the medieval tavern often lies not in its bandits or its brawls, but in its profoundly, utterly disgusting bathroom situation. Now, let's talk about the collective body odor, because it's not just a tavern problem, it's a people problem. Personal hygiene, as we've hinted, was not a priority, nor was it easily achievable. Most people bathed rarely, if at all, especially common folk who lacked access to clean, heated water. Bathing was a laborious, time-consuming effort, and water was precious. For many, a full body wash might happen once a month, or even less frequently, depending on the season and the availability of resources. So imagine a room full of dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals who haven't properly bathed in weeks, if not months. The scent is a powerful, inescapable reality, a testament to the fact that cleanliness was truly next to impossible for the majority. Their clothes, worn for days, weeks, or even months without washing, infested with sweat, grime, and the inevitable collection of insects. Woolen tunics, linen undergarments, heavy cloaks, all absorbing the daily accumulation of dirt, smoke, body odor, and whatever else they came into contact with. Washing clothes was also a monumental task, involving harsh soaps, often lye-based, cold water, and strenuous manual labor. So most people simply didn't do it very often. The result is a collective aroma that goes beyond mere unpleasantness. It's a profound, layered scent of human existence, unfiltered and unperfumed. Your modern, detergent-fresh clothing would scream its pristine status in this environment, making you stand out like a sore, scented thumb. And let's not forget about hair and teeth. Unbrushed, unkempt, matted hair, often home to a thriving ecosystem of lice, fleas, and other delightful parasites. The constant scratching you'll witness, and soon experience, is not a nervous tic. It's a direct response to a very real, very prevalent infestation. Dental issues were universal and agonizing. Without toothbrushes, toothpaste, or regular dental care, teeth were often stained, decayed, missing, or riddled with infection. Toothaches were a common form of medieval torture, and the breath of many patrons would be a potent cocktail of stale ale, rotting food particles, and gum disease. Your modern, orthodontically perfect smile would be considered an anomaly, a strange and perhaps suspicious display of unusual dental health. The combined effect of all this? Imagine hundreds of unwashed people packed into a small, hot, smoky, incredibly noisy room, stewing in their own filth. That's the Medieval Tavern. It's not just a place, it's an immersive sensory experience of profound human squalor. The air is thick with their collective exhalations, their unwashed essences, their microbial exchange. You're not just breathing, you're inhaling centuries of human disregard for basic sanitation, and your modern immune system, coddled by Lysol and frequent hand washing, is about to face its ultimate trial. You'll feel the grime on your own skin, the itch in your hair, and the profound existential despair that comes from being utterly overwhelmed by the sheer relentless dirtiness of it all. Welcome to the authentic medieval human experience. You are not alone in the Medieval Tavern. Oh no. You are merely a temporary resident in a thriving ecosystem, one dominated by pests and vermin who view you, and indeed the entire establishment, as a convenient food source and a warm, inviting home. First up, the rats and mice. These aren't shy, skittish creatures. They are bold, unafraid, and very much part of the furniture. They run freely, scurrying across the floors, darting between legs, and often daring to venture onto the tables themselves, snatching fallen crumbs or sipping from unguarded spills. They are the true owners of the tavern, merely allowing humans to occupy their space. Their presence is a constant, unsettling reminder of the profound lack of hygiene and the fact that you're sharing your dining experience with creatures that carry a host of diseases. And then there are the fleas and lice. Oh, the fleas and lice. They are in your hair, in your clothes, in the straw bedding, if you were foolish enough to pay for a bed, everywhere. Itching is not just a possibility. It's a constant state of being, a persistent, low-level torment, a medieval lullaby of irritation. You'll find yourself subconsciously scratching, trying to alleviate the incessant bites, only to realize that every patron around you is doing the exact same thing. These tiny, relentless parasites are an unavoidable fact of medieval life, and the tavern, with its close quarters and unwashed inhabitants, is their ideal breeding ground. Your modern body, unaccustomed to such a constant barrage of insect bites, will react with a chorus of angry red welts, each one a testament to your temporary status as a host organism. Flies and other insects are another pervasive problem. They swarm around food, drink, and anything warm or decaying. They're sampling your meal before you do, depositing their own microbial payload with every landing. In warmer months, they are an omnipresent, buzzing cloud, a constant nuisance that lands on your face, in your ale, and on your very soul. Mosquitoes, gnats, beetles, the entire insect kingdom seems to have decided that the Medieval Tavern is the hottest club in town. They add to the noise, the filth, and the overall sense of discomfort, making every attempt at eating or drinking a battle against persistent, winged assailants. The general infestation is not just a nuisance, it's a fundamental part of the medieval tavern experience. The tavern is a thriving ecosystem of creepy crawlies, and you, with your relatively clean and well-fed modern body, are just another food source or host. You're not just drinking a pint, you're engaging in a biological exchange, trading your blood and skin cells for a fresh batch of medieval pathogens. Every surface, every crack, every shadow harbors a multitude of tiny, scurrying, biting creatures, all vying for their own piece of the action. It's a humbling, disgusting realization. For all your human arrogance, in this environment, you are merely another biological component in a grand, teeming, incredibly unhygienic web of life. And for your modern sensibilities, it's profoundly, utterly revolting. You've endured the stench, the squalor, the questionable food, and the pervasive vermin. But the night is not over, and neither are the threats. Now, let's talk about the unique and often brutal form of conflict resolution in the medieval tavern: brawls and blades. Alcohol, close quarters, a profound lack of personal space, and a distinct absence of polite society often lead to explosive violence. Tempers are hair-trigger sensitive, fueled by drink, grievances, real or imagined, and the general brutality of daily life. The atmosphere is perpetually charged, simmering just below the surface, waiting for the slightest provocation to erupt into a storm of fists and fury. It's not a question of if a brawl will happen, but when, and whether you'll be lucky enough to not be involved. The causes of these delightful little skirmishes are numerous and often absurd. Insults, real or imagined, can spark a fight in an instant. Cheating at cards or dice, which, as we discussed, is practically guaranteed, is another frequent catalyst. Perceived slights, a bumped elbow, a spilled drink, or simply the general belligerence of an overly intoxicated patron can all be sufficient grounds for a full-blown melee. Sometimes there's no discernible cause at all, just a sudden, unprovoked explosion of pent-up aggression. It's a microcosm of the medieval world's inherent violence. played out on the stage of the tavern floor, where grievances are settled not with words, but with blunt force trauma. And the weapons of choice? Fists, of course, usually heavy and unadorned. Tankards, those heavy earthenware or wooden mugs, make excellent blunt instruments, capable of cracking a skull or knocking out a tooth with terrifying efficiency. Chairs, overturned and swung with drunken abandon, become impromptu shields and bludgeons. But things can escalate quickly. Knives, daggers, and sometimes even short swords are carried by many patrons, and in the heat of a drunken rage, they are quickly drawn. Anything at hand can be pressed into service as a weapon in a pinch: a stool, a heavy platter, even a piece of firewood from the hearth. It's an environment where every object, however mundane, holds the potential for violence, and where the line between a spirited argument and a potentially lethal confrontation is razor thin. The aftermath of these brawls is rarely pretty. Injuries are common: broken bones, lost teeth, disfigurement, and sometimes, for the truly unlucky, death. The tavern keeper might not even blink, having seen it all 1,000 times before. The injured are often simply dragged outside, left to tend to their wounds as best they can, or succumb to their fate. There's no ambulance, no emergency room, no sympathetic medical staff. A rudimentary bandage, some questionable herbal poultice, and a lot of praying is about all you can expect. You, the modern observer, will be horrified by the casual brutality, the swiftness with which violence erupts and subsides, and the profound indifference to its consequences. It's a stark, brutal reminder that in this world, life is cheap, and your physical well-being is entirely your own responsibility. Beyond the physical violence, there's a more insidious, pervasive threat lurking in the crowded confines of the medieval tavern: theft. The constant threat to your possessions, however meager, is very real. Your purse, your cloak, your boots, your bread, anything of value is a target. Assume everyone is looking to take something from you, and you'll be closer to the truth than if you assume friendly intentions. In a world of scarcity, every possession, no matter how small, has value, and there are always desperate individuals willing to relieve you of yours. You are, in essence, a walking, breathing target in a hunter-gatherer society, and they are the hunters. These are not amateur opportunists. These are skilled thieves, masters of their craft. They work in groups, often seamlessly blending into the crowd, creating distractions while another member of their crew relieves you of your goods. A bumped elbow, a loud argument drawing your attention, a spilled drink, all expertly orchestrated diversions designed to pull your gaze away from your vulnerable purse. They are artists of larceny, their fingers quick and their movements subtle, leaving you bewildered and poorer before you even realize what's happened. Your modern understanding of personal security, based on zippers, safes, and secure wallets, is utterly useless against their honed, centuries-old techniques. They see your modern fanny pack as a delightful challenge, a treasure chest waiting to plunder. And once your possessions are gone, there is no recourse. The local authorities, if they exist at all beyond a local lord's bailiff, are unlikely to care about a stolen coin from a transient traveler. You're on your own, left to mourn your loss and perhaps face the very real consequences of being stripped of your means of survival. There's no police report, no insurance claim, no sympathetic hearing. Your loss is simply your problem, another grim lesson in the harsh realities of medieval life. You can shout, you can accuse, But unless you catch them in the act and are willing to engage in a very public, very physical confrontation, your money is gone forever. This constant threat profoundly impacts the importance of trust, or rather, the utter lack thereof. You learn to trust no one, especially not after a few drinks when your judgment is impaired. That newfound friend who's been laughing at your jokes and buying you rounds of ale, they might very well be planning your demise, or, at the very least, waiting for the opportune moment to relieve you of your remaining cash. Every friendly overture, every seemingly innocuous conversation must be viewed through a lens of deep suspicion. You're forced to operate in a state of perpetual vigilance, constantly guarding your belongings, your back, and your trusting nature. It's a profoundly isolating experience, a constant reminder that in the medieval tavern, genuine companionship is a rare and dangerous commodity. So you've been robbed, or perhaps you've been inadvertently drawn into a brawl, or maybe you've just accidentally insulted the wrong person. Now what? You're about to discover the joys of medieval law, or rather, the terrifying lack thereof. Local justice was often arbitrary, biased, brutal, and swift. Forget Miranda rights, forget the presumption of innocence, forget anything resembling due process. If you're accused, you're often presumed guilty, and the punishment can range from a hefty fine, if you're lucky and wealthy, to a public shaming, to mutilation, or even death. There's no trial by jury of your peers. There's just a lord's bailiff, a local constable, or the tavern keeper's own rough justice. Indeed, the tavern keeper often wielded significant authority within their establishment. They might act as judge, jury, and executioner within their own four walls, particularly if you've caused trouble, damaged property, or assaulted another patron. Their word is law, and their judgment is absolute. They have a vested interest in maintaining order, or at least their version of order, and protecting their business. Disobey them, and you might find yourself summarily beaten, thrown out into the night, or handed over to the local authorities with a damning testimony. They are the final arbiter of disputes, the local strongman who maintains a fragile peace with an iron fist. The consequences of violence in this system are severe and designed to be a deterrent. For minor offenses, you might face a fine, which for a peasant could be crippling. For more serious offenses, such as theft or grievous bodily harm, you could be imprisoned in a terrible dungeon, a cold, damp, rat-infested hole in the ground that was more a death sentence than a correctional facility. Public shaming, such as being placed in stocks or a pillory, was a common punishment for various transgressions. And for truly serious offenses, mutilation, the loss of an ear, a hand, or even your tongue, was a brutal reality, a permanent mark of your crime. Death was also a common punishment for a surprising array of offenses, from murder to repeat theft. Justice was not about rehabilitation. It was about deterrence, retribution, and maintaining social order through fear. And if you happen to be poor, your plight is even more dire. The peasant's plight in the face of medieval law is one of utter helplessness. You have no leverage, no rights, no means of appealing an unfair judgment. You're just another nuisance to be dealt with summarily, another body to be punished to set an example. The law, such as it was primarily designed to protect the wealthy and powerful, and to keep the common folk in line. Your cries of innocence will fall on deaf ears. Your pleas for mercy will be ignored. and your meager life will be extinguished with profound indifference. Your wealth, or lack thereof, is a significant factor in how you are treated, with the poor often receiving the harshest, most arbitrary punishments. So, after all that, my dear masochistic listener, after enduring the mud, the stench, the diseases, the threats, the squalor, the discomfort, and the constant peril of a single night in a medieval tavern, still fancy a pint in the good old days? Still think it's charming, rustic, or a place where you could simply hang out? I didn't think so. You'd be lucky to survive the night without death, dismemberment, crippling debt, or a permanent case of the plague. In all likelihood, you'd probably die of dysentery anyway. A far less glorious end than battling a dragon. Sweet dreams, you masochist. And remember, every flush of your modern toilet is a small victory against the overwhelming horror of history. If you've managed to stay awake through this entire historical immersion therapy, or if the persistent descriptions of medieval filth have somehow lulled you into a profound, existential despair that mimics sleep, consider subscribing. Or don't. History doesn't care. But if you're keen for